'Cause I'm yours to keep if you want to.
Bong. We are live. Thanks for coming through, man, for
thank
part
you for
two.
having me, man. Thank you.
Before we even got to do part one,
Right.
we're doing part two.
Right.
Let's dive into it. What's your full name?
Tim Larew. Timothy Joseph Larew is my full name, yeah.
You named after anybody?
Yeah, funny enough. So my great-grandfather, my mom's dad's dad,
Okay.
who I might have met when I was a baby, but
Okay.
no memory. Timothy Joseph Crowley.
Okay.
So
Great.
my great-grandfather.
Yeah.
My mom's dad's dad. Yeah.
Okay.
Timothy Joseph Crowley. Yeah.
Cool. And where are you from?
I grew up in Connecticut.
Okay.
I was born outside Chicago.
Okay.
I went to school in Boston. A lot of people in music know me from Boston.
Sure.
I grew up in Connecticut. So
What was it like growing up in Connecticut?
it was the burbs, man. It was my whole life was sports. That was it. Yeah, it was sports. That was my social life. I always tell people like basketball to this day, like you see me, anyone that knows me or follows me sees me hooping all the time. I play golf, tennis, like that was my life growing up from, 4 to 18 years old. That was it. It was like a really, really quiet town. All the lights are off by like 10 p.m. No one's really doing anything like social life, even for like, I didn't go out that much in high school. I didn't party that much, but for kids that grew up where I grew up, it was like bonfire parties or like basement house parties. That was it. That was, we're like 25, 30 minutes from anything. Like the closest movie theater is 20 minutes away. The closest mall is 20 minutes away. Yeah. They call it Smellington because it was a bunch of cows, farmland. That was it.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm from like the burbs. It's funny. It's gotten more developed as I moved from there. My parents still live there though. So when I go home, I'm surprised there's like, a lot of the big chain restaurants and stores. But when I was growing up, it was like mom and pop supermarket, mom and pop video rental store, like, 15 minutes from a Blockbuster. But I lived in like a little isolated, it's like 20 minutes from Hartford, about 20 minutes from the Massachusetts border, like an hour and a half from Boston, and like 2.5 from New York City. So I didn't spend any time in the city growing up. It was really like when I was in high school, I think I went to New York really for the first time, and then Boston I didn't go till I was about to go to school there. So yeah, grew up in the burbs.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
What was there a particular sport when you were younger that was like one you thought about like potentially going pro playing?
Yeah, definitely. It was always basketball.
Okay.
Yeah, that dream died when I was in like 5th grade, I would say, when I realized like, I remember I have a memory of my doctor, my pediatrician, at one point when I was like 7 or 8, looking at my height chart and telling me I was going to be like 6'2". And the tallest person in my family is like basically what I am, like 5'10".
Okay.
So when she said that, I was like, oh man, like maybe I have a shot.
Yeah.
And then I realized that wasn't going to happen. Like I can shoot, but that was about it. I had a very one-dimensional game. So I gave up my hoop dreams in 5th grade, but any of my like writing or those like little things they have you fill out when you're in school when you're a kid, like what your dreams are, I always said NBA player up until I was in like 5th grade. So it was that, and still to this day, I'm blessed. I'm very happy I can like still play basketball consistently. I played everything, but that was my dream.
Did you switch over after basketball to another sport as like a potential sport for pro career? That was it?
That was it. Yeah, and it's funny because like, tennis, golf, some of the other stuff I play, like those would have I would have had a chance maybe if I had committed to a life of that, but I never. That was it, really. That was like my last. I continued to play everything through high school, but that was my last year of like, maybe I could really go pro. Maybe I could really do this, but nothing else. Nothing else replaced it.
I still I have the itch for golf like that. Like like it's like one of those like I wish I would have.
Yeah. Hey, it's never too late for golf. That's the thing, man. My grandfather's 88, and anytime I go home, I play with him.
Yeah.
Which is a huge blessing. Yeah. You can
Sick.
play forever.
Yeah. I played yesterday morning.
Wow.
Just a par 3 course that's like in Palos Verdes.
Okay.
It's amazing.
Which one?
It's called like
I was just looking at that.
Tirana?
Yes, Tirana or whatever. Yeah. It's nice.
Oh my God. That's
okay.
like one
we
of
gotta
the
go.
nicest.
I've always wanted to play there.
Yeah.
I was actually, I'm playing Friday morning. But I was looking at, I was like, I never am in that region or that area of LA, but I'm like, I got to get out there. It looks beautiful.
It's insane.
Yeah.
I shot a 3 over yesterday.
Oh, shit. So you play?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
We'll get out there.
I mean, it was the best. I was the best I've ever played there because it's tiny greens and it's tough conditions. And I was just like throwing darts.
Hey, man, par 3s are deceptively difficult. People think just short holes or, but it's like, those are damn near the hardest holes because it's par 3. It's like you got to have, a par 5, you got room for error. You hit a bad tee shot on a par 5, you can still make par.
For sure. Yeah, par 3, it's like pressure's on, baby.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Killer.
Mm-hmm.
So sports. What about like family unit? What was your family unit like growing up?
Great family. I would say beyond my family, even like it was a pretty small neighborhood, like 20 or so houses, but it was
really small.
Yeah, it was small. Everything was small. I mean, the whole town was 13,000 people. That's like one little pocket of LA.
Park City was the same for me growing up
Yeah.
there, but like felt like it was much more spread out.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so in my little neighborhood, the timing, it just kind of worked out. There was like a lot of kids that were in my age range. I was like one of the oldest ones. It was like when I was, let's say, like 12, there was like a bunch of kids from like 8 to 12. There was like 14 or 15 kids. So I'll get to my family, but my whole like neighborhood, sort of like my unit of people that I rolled with, it was like this really like this neighborhood group. And every summer day we'd get up and knock on each other's doors before cell phones. I miss those days.
Yep.
And just, hey, what do we want to play today? We were playing football, we were playing baseball, we were playing basketball, we fucking whatever, made games up,
Yeah.
Foursquare, like whatever it was. We just played sports like all day, every day. And my family, younger brother, younger sister, she was like the one girl in the neighborhood. So she's probably the most athletic of anyone, all of us. Like she's a better golfer than me, She's tiny, but she grew up playing like very high level softball, great basketball player, everything. 'Cause she grew up the youngest and the only girl. So she just, 2 older brothers, she just became an athlete. So that's my family. Yeah, it was a, pretty standard, like mom, dad, again, like blessed to have like a, just a solid like family unit. My grandparents were very much in my life. My mom's parents and then my dad's parents they didn't live as close, but I had a good relationship with them.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Cool. What was your first job?
My first job was refereeing basketball games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How old were you when you got that job?
I want to say 15. I don't even think it was 16. I want to say it was 15. It was definitely high school. 14, 15, 16, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And then I did just kind of like odd jobs for the rec department.
Okay.
We got Bob Tedford in town. Rest in peace. Wonderful guy. He was a guy that I think my dad knew, and we were just kind of a connected family in the town. And anything I wanted to do to help these sports programs in town, he would basically like create a job for me. But
cool.
Refereeing was my first real gig, and it was a challenge, man. It definitely like it made me have thicker skin than I would have otherwise.
Sure.
It doesn't matter if you're reffing, 5th grade girls or high school. It's like, you're getting yelled at by everyone. No call is the right call.
Yeah.
So it was good. It's funny. When I talk about basketball, I've seen it from every angle. I was a referee, a coach, a player, a color commentator, a play-by-play commentator, a writer. Like I've played every single role you can play with basketball. So, I hated it for getting yelled at all the time, but I loved it for, hey, I get paid to run up and down a basketball court.
Sure. And then, so I'm assuming the sequence probably follows with those other jobs you were just laying out, but after you were refereeing, what progressed from that?
Yeah, it wasn't even like progression. It was just like, being involved with sports in any way. So I think the next job, my 8th grade basketball coach, who brought me on to be an assistant coach when I was in high school, he started like a local sports newspaper. And he knew I was a good writer, that I loved writing. That was my, it's been a through line my whole life, but that was like my favorite subject. I just loved writing, and he knew that. I talked to him about it before he started this paper, and he hired me as one of the first staff writers when I was like 17 or 18 years old. So
nice.
I would go to like random like softball games or baseball games, a lot of stuff I didn't care about, but again, it was like I get to write about sports and get paid. It was chump change, but get paid a little money. And so when I said sports is everything, it really was like that was how I was getting paid. That was how I was making friends. That was how I was just learning how to deal with adults, everything about it. So that was my high school job experience, was just like all different like random sports shit.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then what was, I guess, college for you was where?
Boston. I went to BU in Boston.
Nice. How'd you land there?
It's funny, man, looking back, like I didn't have much of a idea of what I wanted to do in college, what I wanted to major in, where I wanted to go. I applied to like a really wide range of schools. I did like, the local stuff, like the state schools, and my mom and dad were just like, hey, worst case, they're cheap, you can get in. Apply to those. I did. I applied to a couple schools in Boston. I don't even think I applied to one in New York City. I think I was just like, if I'm going to be in a city, I want to be in Boston for whatever reason. It was a little closer to home.
Mm-hmm.
But then I applied to like Pepperdine. I applied to a couple schools down south, just like big sports schools. I just wanted to have like a wide range. BC was the only school I didn't get into that I applied to. And I have a chip on my shoulder because of that. And I like BU a lot better anyway. Having like lived in the city, I'm like, BC's not the city. I have an edge with BC, but it's not the city. So no, I just, I applied to a bunch and Villanova. So it came down to BU or Villanova, which is in Philly, and Villanova is like a much bigger sports school. Like I love their basketball program, and went down there, and I felt like a little bit similar to how I felt about BC, which is like it was a contained campus. It was like it was in the city, but it just felt like this sort of isolated bubble. And I grew up in what I felt like was an isolated bubble. And when I went to BU, it was the city. It's Commonwealth Avenue. It's like one of the main streets in Boston. Like that is the campus. There's no contained campus. It's not like you step on campus. Like when you're on campus, you're in the city. Like you're just passing by people that are, going to Fenway or going to a concert or going to work or whatever. And I love that about it. I got there and I remember my mom, she went to a small school, Providence in Rhode Island, and she thought that I would like a similar experience. But when I stepped foot onto BU, it was like a right away thing. I'm like, oh, this just feels like home. It feels like, I don't know why it felt that way, but it felt like the next step for me. I'm like, this is like a world that I want to open myself up to. I want to get away from what I grew up with, which is like, everybody, everybody knows you, you're doing the same shit every day. I'm like, this feels like I can get into anything here, and that feels really cool. So that's how I landed there. Yeah.
And what was that like? What'd you get into literally when you started going there?
Yeah, you could guess it, sports. So my first like few days before classes started, I went to the gym immediately. To this day, one of my close friends, Kevin, met him like the first day in my gym. We were basketball teammates all through college. Went to his wedding a couple years ago. Met him like the first day.
Wow.
My one friend from high school. I had one friend. No, I had two. One girl, one guy. My friend Shaq, who I went to high school with, he would go to the gym with me. So I'm still to this day one of my close friends too. So we went to the gym, just, my friend Kevin and I started a basketball team, and this is all like before classes start. And then maybe 2 days into class, I guess it was 2 days before, because it was like the club fair or whatever, where they had on the, wherever it was, they laid out like all the different clubs you could join, and there was a sports radio station. So I was like, perfect, like, why not? Like, I've done my sports writing. This is what I love. I'll go to the first informational session. But I remember I almost didn't go. A friend of mine, Dan McCarthy, who I had just met playing basketball, he was like, "No, come on, like, let's roll. Let's just see what it's about." I don't know why I was hesitating, but I think I was just, new to a city, I'm like, I wasn't sure that it was something I wanted to get into, but I went, and immediately I was like, oh, this is like my people. It's like a bunch of, I don't know anybody here, but we all love sports. And hockey's the big sport at BU. Basketball is not the big sport. It's D1, but no one really cares about basketball there. But I did. So hockey was the most sought after. I remember after that meeting, this guy Sopan Deb, who's now a big New York Times writer, published a couple books. It's funny, like he's had an incredible journey. He was a senior when I was a freshman. He announced to everybody, like, all right, I'm going to send an email tomorrow with the different beats that are open, the different sports, the different teams you can cover. And hockey was the most sought after. It was like men's hockey, then women's hockey, then basketball, then went down the list. And I signed up to cover the golf team, because I was like, no one's gonna give a fuck about golf, and like that's something I would enjoy. I'll be a golf writer. But I said, I emailed him personally. I was like, hey, like, if a basketball slot opens up, like, please, I'm like super passionate about basketball. Even though he had told me that was usually like a junior and senior level role. And then the next day he's like, yo, like, somebody backed out, like, you're in if you want it. I was fucking thrilled. I was like, I'm going to be like a basketball writer for like a real team, like a D1 team. So my role was like, it was beat writer. It was like travel with the team and do like post-game recaps, and do like live blogging during the game. Just cool. So that was what I started in. I remember we had our first game in like October, and it was a thrill, man. And fast forward, like the conference championship, we made it to the conference championship that year. And, it was a senior and a junior, this guy named Seth Arensky, who was my partner for the next 2 years, and a guy named Jeff Cohen. Jeff got sick for the championship game, and Seth called me. He was like, hey, you want to do color for this game, color commentary. It's funny, I'd always, growing up, like, I would play Madden, I would play FIFA, I'd play NBA, 2K, whatever, and I would be like commentating the games while I was playing. So I was like, this is my moment. I'm ready for this.
Yeah.
And it was incredible, man. We went up to UVM in Burlington, and I called the game. My dad, I think my sister came up too. And it was a thrill, and I was like, man, this is what I want to do. Like, this is fucking sick. I had so much fun. And then Jeff graduated, so I became the color guy by sophomore year, which was, like, pretty unusual. And I really, really loved it. And I had a sports radio show. It was like, that was continued to be my life. It was sports radio. We'll get to the next chapter, but that was my
no rush.
But that was just, man, I could go on I could just ramble. But
no, that's cool.
But that's how
the whole point,
that was my the beginning of my college experience was like, you know, and I lived right around the corner from Fenway, and I'm a huge Yankees fan, but I really enjoyed going to Fenway regardless. And anytime the Yankees were in town my freshman year, I would still go.
Funny. That's a controversial.
I know. And funny enough, unfortunately, the last time the Yankees won the World Series was that year, my freshman year, 2009. And I remember, like, you know, walking up the street the morning. They won on my birthday, November 5th. So or like 6 minutes before, it was like 11:54, and they won the World Series in 2009. I'm in Boston. I'm dating a girl from the Bronx. So this whole thing, I was like living this like dream, you know, where I'm like calling basketball games. I'm like dating a girl from the Bronx. The Yankees win. I'm in Boston. Like, I'm walking around the next. I remember I'm listening to fucking Empire State of Mind, Jay-Z, and I'm like, this is just the best. Like, I'm not in New York, but like I've made my own little version of New York and this city that I love. It was a really fun fall. Yeah.
It sounds awesome, dude.
Yeah. It was sick. You know, it was, you know, it justified my intuition with going there. It was like 3 months in, I was like, oh, I made the best decision ever.
Of course.
Like, I'm just
hitting it up, like, literally out the park.
No, 100%. And I was, you know, I just felt like I was quickly becoming a version of me that I knew existed, but I wasn't able to be where I grew up.
Yeah.
You know, which was really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So in college, it's just all sports whole
Pretty
time?
much. I mean, well, not the whole college experience. This is like the first 2 years.
Sure.
It was like, you know, I played ball throughout it, go to Celtics games, you know, do the reporting and shit. But it was my sophomore into junior year was when I was home in Connecticut for the summer. That's when I decided to start a blog. And the inspiration behind that, I made it about my three sort of like pillars, like what kind of made up my life at the time. I was working at a sneaker store, and I really liked sneakers. It was an expensive habit that I've mostly kicked. But I really like sneakers, the sports shit, obviously. And I had started going to concerts, which I did not go to a single show growing up. It wasn't really accessible. And I just, you know, I'm a casual music fan. I knew my shit, but like, you know, I didn't go to any shows or anything like that. About to be end of my freshman year, I saw Wiz Khalifa at this like historic venue called Middle East in Boston, like this really sweaty like basement venue, like 500 cap. And this is like a month before Cushion Orange Juice. And I felt like I was really early on this guy. I'm telling my friends from back home, like, hey, there's this dude Wiz Khalifa that like I think is going to be huge, which was my first experience with that, like knowing about some shit before my friends from home did. And at this point, most of my friends are still from Connecticut. I don't have a lot of like Boston. I have like my BU friends, but I don't know people from the city for real. So, you know, so I see him, the show was crazy. And, you know, a month and a half later, everybody knows who Wiz is. And I was like, that was cool. Like I knew about this guy before other people did. And then a year later, the same thing happened with Odd Future. I heard about them pretty early. And I was just obsessed with all their shit. Tyler, Earl, like everything they were doing, I thought was super cool. And, you know, it was some other shit in between. Again, I was a fan of a lot of stuff, but I always say it was those two acts. It was Wiz and Odd Future that made me be like, damn, I want to be closer to this. Like, I loved going to the shows. I love the feeling of being early on shit, but like, I want to fuse my interests, which is like writing and media and radio and being early on stuff and being a fan of these artists in this genre. So let me just start a blog. Blogs were hot. I was reading blogs, and I was like, I can do this, and I think I can add my own flair to it, and you know, I think I can do my own interesting version of it. So when I was home, I was like, let me just I thought of a name in 5 minutes. You know, bought a domain. You know, signed up for WordPress, and that was it. And I just started. You know, again, I'm like bored out of my mind, home in the middle of nowhere, Connecticut, and I'm like, I feel like that was my last year of being like 1 foot in my old life, 1 foot in my new life.
Sure.
And that was sort of the leaping off point. So I just started writing about, you know, a lot of big artists, just, you know, even like J. Cole was getting big at the time. And, You know, Wiz had gotten big, Odd Future, everybody, you know, Drake was like 2 albums in at that point, but I was writing album reviews, and, you know, they announce a tour, I'm writing about that. I see an interview, I'm writing about it. I remember I was really early on Freddie Gibbs. That was like 2011, same, you know, that was just one of the artists. Dom Kennedy, I tell you, like, Dom was one of my favorite artists. And to this day, like, that era of Dom, one of my favorite eras ever.
Yeah.
So I just kind of discovered my own taste and what I liked writing about, and like I said, kind of fused it all and just started throwing shit online. And Lil B was the first artist that shared something I wrote, and that was, at the time, it was the coolest thing ever. I'm like, man, like, I'm on the sidelines with this sports stuff, but the music stuff, I was able to access an artist really quickly, like within 10 days, and Lil B shared it. I remember I was watching the blog hits at the time, and it was like 40 or 50 a day, like my friends and family. And Lil B shares this album review, and it's like 1,500, 2,000 views in like an hour. And I was like, this is so cool. Like,
Yeah.
I got high from it. You know, I'm
Yeah.
like, I want to do this again and again and again. And I want to figure out how to connect with people more and more. So I take that back to Boston when I go back to school in the fall. And I kind of joined up. One of my basketball teammates had a hip hop show, radio show. So I had already been in the radio station with my sports shit. But then I kind of joined his thing, and I was like, all right, let me be like on this show sort of, and just be like a random contributor every now and then.
Sure.
And then with the blog stuff, I continued to go to shows, and then I started to leverage the blog for press passes, because I was like, I want to start saving money on shows. I'm in college, I got no money. So
Sure.
that was part of it. I was like, hey, like, I'm actually a good writer, so it's not like I'm bullshitting people. I'm like, I can get into these shows. I can do like a really good quality, like, you know, bring my little flip cam and do a review or whatever. And I started getting that. And then I would be at these shows, you know, just striking up. I'd have stickers. Like, I was just like, let me get this blog out there. And I would just strike up conversations with people. I always tell the story about this one guy specifically named D-Note, still one of my great friends to this day, who introduced himself. He's like, I'm a rapper. Like, and I hadn't met a not well-known rapper. You know, like, that was the first time I was like, oh, this is a kid who I don't know. Yeah. But he says he raps. And I immediately, I didn't think too much about it, but immediately something kind of went off, and I'm like, maybe I can like help this guy. So I remember I tailed him to some event. It was like a cypher that a local sneaker boutique was hosting, and I like filmed the whole cypher. And, you know, next day I throw it up on YouTube, and everybody that was a part of that was gassed. And again, another little thing clicks, and I'm like, wait, nobody's doing this in this city. Yeah. Nobody's documenting what's going on. And I very quickly realized, like, oh, there's like a real demand. And I'm not thinking money. I'm not thinking business at all. Sure. I'm just like, this is so fun. And it's really serving people. Like, people want attention. They want a platform, and there's not platforms in the city. And the more and more I'm talking to kids from the city that I'm meeting, it's a very small city, very interconnected. So it's like, I meet D-Note, he introduces me to this guy, G.O.D., introduces me to boom, 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 boom. Everybody knows a bunch of people. And within 3 months of being back in Boston, there was a lot of like, oh, this kid Tim with the blog, you got to meet. Like, he's doing cool shit. Yeah. Yeah, it was a thrill, man. And, you know, that guy D-Note and I basically pitched him an idea. At that point, I was like, yo, like, what if I did like a XXL freshman list for Boston, basically, like, inspired by that idea. But I wanted to go deeper with it. I was like, I want to do events and like certain promotion shit. I want to make a mixtape. I want to do shows. But that was my idea at that point. I was like, let me through my blog. And then one of my best friends, Guillermo, I partnered with him on this concept. I pitched it to him. I just met him. He had a blog, was doing similar things, similar passions. And we were like, let's create this thing called 12 for 12, where we select 12 artists from the city. We don't know really anybody yet, but let's do our research, talk to people, and try to get like a diverse group of 12 artists that we can just start promoting, you know, and start doing ciphers with, events with, and try to spark some like energy, but also just some knowledge in the city, like make sure people know of each other. Sure. Because that's what I was finding is like, no one really knows about all the different stuff that exists here, even though it's a small city. And I felt like I had a responsibility to like just put people on, you know, put fans on, put the community on, and try to connect some dots that I felt like I'm coming in with fresh eyes. You know, sometimes when you're too close to a situation, you don't know what's right in front of you. For sure. And I'm coming from like the burbs in Connecticut, and people in Boston are like, we can't do anything here. Like, there's no outlets, there's no infrastructure. And I'm like, yo, compared to where I'm from, this is a gold mine. Yeah. Like, there's venues, you know, like, yeah, you just had a cipher in a sneaker store. Like, there's it's a city, you know, like you can walk to places, like there's shops, you can do shit. I'm like, I just saw it differently.
Of course.
Man, I always say like it was a really, really, really special time in Boston because there was a lot of very like-minded people. Like I had a friend, Derek Chung, who started this like, it's called Green Street Vault. It was basically like a streetwear store on wheels. Like they would drive around and park and tweet out their location when Twitter was pretty new, and people would pull up, and that became like a community thing. And my friend Guillermo that I just mentioned had his blog. My friend Goodwin, you know Goodwin, obviously.
Yep.
He had his own like production company at Emerson. He was going to school. All just kids that were going to different schools in the city. It's a small city. It's a college town. And I quickly sort of built this network and connected with a lot of people who were very like-minded, who kind of all had the same idea. And everyone was very selfless. It was like, you know, Goodwin was just running around the common, like shooting rappers. Some guys were homeless, some guys were in college, didn't matter. He was just highlighting the raw, real performers in this city. He ended up we connected with a mutual artist. That artist has me come over to interview him on camera. I had never done that before with an artist. And it's Goodwin, who I didn't know, who was the video guy. We connect, and I loved his work. And we were like, oh, let's do this more. Like, let's actually like intentionally collaborate, and let's go around and interview artists. So, you know, within a month or two, like we had like 4 or 5 more under our belt. Then all of a sudden, people not just from our city but other city was like, yo, Tim and Goodwin shit is really good. So anyway, it was I get excited talking about that time because it was the beginning of, you know, how we met, and like all of my whole career it started that year in Boston, and it started from me being like, let me just start a blog and like combine my interests. So yeah, when you say like, was it all sports? It definitely was, and I continued to have sports be a big part of my life. But I started my blog in end of June 2012, and 10 years, crazy. And by like December, I was like, oh no, this is going to take over my life, and I'm cool with that.
Crazy, man.
Yeah.
What a fucking journey.
Yeah, it's
so
wild.
As you're going through that, all building in the early stages, are you starting to see like, oh, I'm going to potentially like do this? And like, did you end up finishing college? Did it get to the point where it was
Barely.
like, am I going to finish? Am I not? How this is?
I had a lot of that. Yeah. I did. Barely. I think if my parents weren't such a big part of my life, I wouldn't have finished.
Yeah.
I really did it for them. I had kind of, it's funny because 10 years later, or 9 years, whatever it is, I look back and I'm like, damn, like I wish I had, you know, what everybody always says, like I wish I had like gone to more classes. I wish I had paid more attention. You can't do it all though, ever in life. It's just, it's foolish to think that. But, you know, there was definitely a time, it was around that time. I would say it was my junior spring, my last year and a half. I did the absolute bare minimum with school. And it wasn't because I was like dicking around or doing nothing. I was like really busy. Working. Yeah, I was busy. Like I would, if there was a pop-up shop, when I have class, I'm going to that. If there's a show, I'm going to that. Like if I stay out late and I can't get up the next morning because I was up till 4 or 5 writing, I would do that. And even, up until like my senior year, I still like, I wasn't a drinker. I never smoked weed. I wasn't like like that. I wasn't on the scene. So, when I was like up late or when I was, whatever, skipping class, I wasn't doing the typical college shit. I was really like writing for real. I was a hermit. I had my friends, I had my sports people, a girl every now and then, but for the most part, like I was pretty isolated, and I was just so focused on what I was doing because I loved it. I was just fully immersed in it. So yeah, I definitely barely graduated. It's funny because like I always took pride in my grades, high school A's, occasional B, but mostly A's. College, it was like first 2 years, it was like, all right, maybe a, B minus or a C plus here and there, but like mostly B pluses. I kind of tailed off a little bit. But it was still like a 3.2 or something like that GPA. By the time I graduated, it was like a 2.7 overall. And it was because I failed like 3 of my 5 classes. I got kicked out of one. Professor told me to never come back. And I always joke with people. I'm like, that was like my bad kid era. That was even senior year. That's when I started to party a little bit. I was really like, I had a real friend group. A lot of the guys, that was like when I kind of found my new community within Boston. And I was working really hard, but yeah, school was definitely back burner. So I graduated. I ended up getting a film and TV degree,
cool.
Which I'm super proud of. And I loved a lot of my school experience, and I loved a lot of the professors. But I couldn't do it all. Yeah. But I somehow, got the piece of paper.
Yeah, I mean, especially when things are going, man, you just get immersed, and it's just one of those things where
it's funny, man.
You
So
lose track of time.
I had this one professor who I loved, this guy named Frank Shore, who was a sports journalism guy. And again, like, this is the track that I'm like sort of leaving behind, but like, I didn't, I wasn't trying to leave sports journalism. It just happened.
Yeah.
So I felt bad because I would be in his class. My favorite class I had was an actual newsroom. So this was like my junior year. This is before I really checked out. It was a newsroom, and we basically put on like a Sports Center type show once a week. Like, that was the class. And you rotated positions. One day you're the anchor, one day you're the host, or whatever. There's two hosts, co-host, host. One day you're camera A, one day you're the producer in the studio, whatever. All the different roles. That was really fun. And the next year, it was like I forget what the name of the class was, but it was just like the another sort of like professional sports journalism, like supposedly prepping you for a job immediately out of college. It was great. And he was an amazing professor. He had worked in the field for many years. But I remember early, that was that fall, I started working with this guy, Cam Meekins. Still to this day, I do, one of my closest friends. He was signed to Atlantic at the time, like stuff was starting to roll. And he kind of threw me into this like manager role, this like interim manager. He had fired his manager. I didn't know shit about the industry. And I was just busy, like trying to handle his shit, trying to like give him feedback on songs. We're like taking trips to New York. And one day I'm in this guy, Frank Shore's class, and I'm in the back, and I'm just very clearly like doing other shit. And he stops the whole class, and it was really embarrassing. And he made everyone look at me like, I forget exactly what it was, but it was some like, yo, like, you can't, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And I hit him up after class. I emailed him and I apologized because I'm like, I know how that comes off. I'm not trying to be this way, but look, I'm actually working. And I was like, I can show you like the professional work I'm doing. And I was like, unfortunately, like, I still really love this subject and this track, but that's not where I'm going right now. So like, I will be more respectful going forward, but understand that like, if I'm in the back on the laptop, I'm working. I'm not like on Twitter. Maybe I'm on Twitter too, but I really am working.
Still kind of working.
Yeah. So, barely graduated, but I made it.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so is that like immediately it starts to be like the management is like the transition, and you're starting to get your feet moving in that direction with climbing into music deeper and working in the business end?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, because like in the moment, just like anything, in the moment, I had no clue what the fuck was going to happen.
Yeah.
No clue. Very little confidence. I remember last year and a half, that time where I was kind of, doing really cool stuff, but there was no progress towards like a traditional job or anything. I remember my mom and dad, who both come from like very traditional, as like a lot of that generation does, very traditional jobs and where I'm from. So they were just like, you got to be, doing internships, you got to be applying to jobs, this and that. And I was just like, nah, like what I'm doing is adding up to something. I don't know what it's adding up to yet, but it's adding up to something.
Sure.
So I'm not going to do that. But then, of course, I graduate, and, I was lucky enough where they're paying for my spot in Boston, like they're paying for my education. They're paying for, I was paying for like food and stuff with my little side jobs, but I didn't have any big bills, so I graduate, and I should have seen this coming, but right away they're like, yeah, when this lease is up in a month, like, you're done. Like,
yeah, good luck.
There's no source of money. Like, figure it out. And I was like, shit, I should have thought about this. They were right. Because I was having so much fun, and I had started to get paid, but when I say get paid, it was like $300 here and there.
Yeah.
Like a little retainer from some company, or like, a little show check. Cam gets, $500. He throws me $50 or whatever. So that felt amazing, because I'm like, I'm doing what I love, and I'm
money.
I'm buying some sneakers off of it, because that's all I cared about at that point. I'm like, shit, if I got money to buy sneakers,
I'm good.
I'm good. But then I was like, damn, like, I think I got to move home, which I didn't want to do, but I just didn't have another plan.
Yeah.
And, I was stubborn, I think, but I didn't want to just like get a traditional job, even though it's like, I advise kids, these days to like do whatever you got to do, like pay the bills, be in the city you need to be in. But, I was fortunate because I had an extra car at the crib. So I moved home, and it was kind of just like doing this balancing act where I'm like, I have my blog. There's no business from that, but it's the source of my entire network. It's the source of energy. It's the platform that allows me to connect with people and do what I do, but it's not a business. And I knew I could make some money writing, so I started to freelance for this one site that's now doesn't exist anymore. But that was like, same thing, like my sneaker money. And I had started to like, I was helping Cam with the management stuff, but again, I still didn't know anything about the music industry, I always love meeting kids now that are like 17, 18 that reach out to me and ask for advice. And I'm like, well, first off, you're so far ahead of where I was. Like, I was 22. I didn't know anything about the industry.
Yeah.
It just wasn't in my vision. You know, I didn't read books. I didn't study the industry. I wasn't
Yeah.
interning. I'm not, whatever. I don't know who anyone is. I just fell into this. So I got a very late start, and I was playing catch up, I felt. So I'm, 22, 23, like helping manage. And I always tell Cam, but Cam kind of helped me learn the game because he was signed to Atlantic. So I was able to at least get into that building and like see, in that case, like the lack of anything that was happening there.
Yeah.
And just how like inept everyone was. And I was like, oh, okay, well, let me take that knowledge back to like whenever I start helping other artists, like I now know through that situation that like our team has to have it figured out. Like, you can't rely on one of these fucking corporations. Anyway, so, but I was a student. I will say that with everything I've ever been a part of. Like, I'm definitely a student of it. So when I say, it's like I didn't know anything about the industry, but when I'm writing about all these artists, I'm doing my diligence. Like, I'm studying like a Christian Clancy. I'm studying a Pat Corcoran, like when I was watching Chances Rise really close. Like, those guys, they were my first like real, artist manager friends beyond my city. Like, I connected with them. I would talk to Chance when we had the same amount of followers, like 2,500, so like it's funny, I ran into him like a week and a half ago. I hadn't seen him in years. It was great. But I'm watching him and Pat, and I'm like, all right, well, these guys are building this like kind of independent business. I got to know Steven Victor, who's Pusha T's manager. I just sort of through Cam, through like a random connection with Mike Karen, so I was getting connected. And then anyone I'm writing about, I'm digging deep. I'm like, who's involved? Who's the manager? I don't really care much about the label, but I'm like, who's the videographer? How do you assemble a team?
Yeah.
So I was studying it. So at this point, I had graduate about, the year before when I did that whole 12 for 12 thing. That basically, it was controversial, but like that definitely, I think, put like me and my blog on like damn near every artist in the city's radar. Yeah. For better or worse. Because people wanted to be a part of it. It was split. As you can imagine, there was 50% of the artists and creatives in the city were like, this is super dope. Like, someone's doing something for the city. I may not be involved on paper, but let me pull up to an event. Let me see what it's about. Let me reach out to Tim or Guillermo or Blair, whoever's involved. And then there was definitely a group of artists. A lot of them were like the older, more jaded artists that started to say shit on Twitter, started to call me racist, started all the shit, for not including every artist in this. It just, none of it made sense. But in hindsight, I'm like, I understand what's behind that, because you're looking at someone that is white, that comes from Connecticut, that like kind of made a statement of like, oh, well, here's some artists that I want to promote. Sure. I'm like, well, it wasn't about exclusivity. It was actually inclusive if you took the time to think about it. But anyway,
different story.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, we could go down that rabbit hole, but we don't need to. So, where was I? So that kind of era, like the 2012 into 13, I met everybody. I met OG Swagger Dick, who I think you know OG. Yeah, right? Of course. I met him at a Odd Future pop-up event. We just struck up a conversation. I thought he was just a character, and he's still one of my best friends, But immediately we kind of, he wasn't even really doing music. He had like made a couple of songs as jokes. And I was like, hey, you might have something here, like in your own unique way. But I'm like, you have like this entertaining thing about you. He introduces me to Michael Christmas. I meet this artist, Jeff Replay, he reached out. Jeff Replay reached out to me. He was one of those first 50% that just saw what I was doing. He's like, yo, I want to introduce myself. I'm like, he was like 18 years old. He reached out. He brings me to his neighborhood. And at this point, I'm just like going all over Boston. And it was a thrill for me, because I'm like, damn, like this is really the city for real. Yeah. And when people talk about, oh, Boston's racist or this and that, yeah, like anything, there's a portion of the city that lives up to its reputation. But Boston is incredibly integrated. Like it's the coolest melting pot of cultures in all of these different spaces in the city, all these different neighborhoods. You have to go there to understand, Yeah. And luckily I had a handful of people that like showed me the real Boston, quote unquote. Replay was one of those guys. I go to his neighborhood. It was actually Stizz's neighborhood, so I didn't know Stizz, but he pulls up and I'm kind of like, I was doing anything. I'm like, he's like, yo, just shoot me. I'm like, all right, cool. I got a camera, like a T2i, and I'm like, I don't know if this is a music video or a vlog or what, but like my camera's rolling and this is fun. I was doing anything. So I always say it, but somewhere I have on a hard drive like footage of me meeting Stizz, because Replay is going through one by one. That was the vlog, and he's introducing me to his people. And Stizz from off camera, it's a funny story. From off camera, I'm not looking at this. It's like, if you're a Replay, I got the camera on you. I'm just looking at you. And he calls somebody over, and who I now know as Stizz was like, yo, dap me up, cameraman. And I was like, I just didn't like it. You know, I didn't care where I was. I was just like, okay. I kind of ignored it. And then he gets close. He's like, yo, dap me up, Tim. So I was like, oh shit, like this guy knows who I am for whatever reason. So I look over and it was Stizz. And you know, that day I remember he followed me, hit me with a follow back, and the rest was history. So anyway, it was this, you know, year span where I met like everybody in the city and became friends with a lot of people. And you know, I would say my first, like, you know, the first time someone called me a manager, which I never asked to be, I never intended to be that. I didn't know what it was. We were doing in Goodwin's house in Cambridge, we were doing like Christmas would come through OG. We would just all shoot the shit. You know, I don't smoke. They'd be smoking. You know, I'd be drinking like a 40, like, you know, the nasty college kids we were, you know, $2 malt liquor. And we'd just be kicking it. You know, people would be playing video games. Christmas and OG sometimes would record. Christmas a lot. Christmas was like, I would say the hungriest of like anybody I met. And early on, I didn't particularly love his music, but similar to OG, I was like, there's something about this guy. Like, he could really rap, but I was like, there's something about this guy that's like, he's a star. Yeah. He's a star. And I felt like, again, kind of how I felt the previous year, even when I stumbled upon the scene for the first time, I started meeting these people, getting to know them more. And I'm like, yo, like, why does no one see that these kids are like bigger than their neighborhoods? Like they could, it's Boston. There's a reputation. It's hard to get out of, quote unquote. But I'm like, somebody's got to see it. Somebody's got to do something about it. Come on. So that's what me and Goodwin kind of started to do with our friends. It was not business. It was friendship. And it was like Christmas coming through the house and him, you know, playing me some records and him, you know, being like, what do you think about these? Like, I genuinely want your opinion, because he respected what I was doing in my blog. I had good taste, you know, so I would give him little bits of advice here and there. And, you know, Goodwin would be like recording him for, you know, no charge. There was no money exchange, nothing. Like, Christmas would be in his, you know, closet, his like, you know, soundproofed closet, and just, you know, they'd be recording music, and it would be like pretty, you know, low quality, wouldn't be like mixed or mastered. And I would just do Christmas a favor. I'm like, sure, I'll like premiere it on the site. That's no problem. Then we started, you know, Goodwin started shooting videos, and he and I would sit and like, you know, I would kind of advise with like the edit. He'd be editing them, and we did that for like Christmas and OG. And, you know, at one point Christmas comes to me more seriously, and he was like, yo, like, he was young, 17. And he was like, it's just not working. He's like, I'm getting like, you know, my family, my close friends excited about it, but why is this not working? Like, why can't I grow a fan base? Yeah. And I was like, look, I have one condition. Like, if I'm going to spend time giving you my opinion, you have to try it. That's all I asked. There was still no business. I'm like, you just have to try it, because I don't want to waste my time. But he was really hungry and determined. And I basically had this long talk with him. I was like, look, man, like, the music you're making doesn't line up with your personality whatsoever. Like, there's the branding is off. And again, this is just from me kind of studying what works with other artists. Sure. And I was like, you know, you have like a larger than life, lovable, comical, you know, everybody loves you. Everybody wants a fucking bear hug from you. Like, you just have this very welcoming, this huge smile. You're hilarious. And your music, understandably, his dad was in jail at the time. He was going through some difficult shit. He had dropped out of high school. You know, he didn't have a trajectory to anything great on paper. So he was kind of depressed and going through it, and his music sounded like that. And I was like, I'm not trying to advise you to be someone you're not, but I think this is authentically you. Yeah. So I was like, try to approach the music like you approach your character. Like, you come up and greet me on the street. That's how your music should sound. And I'm not saying like dumb it down. I'm not saying like don't, you know, have your bars and, you know, but I'm like, just make it a little bit more like digestible, approachable, sort of friendly and fun. Started sending me songs, and there was this one song, Daily. It was the first song we kind of, as a team, like he, Goodwin, and I like did together. I was like, Christmas, this one's it. And it was like no hook. It was incredibly dry. Goodwin produced it. And it was just Christmas. It was incredibly dry humor, and it was just him bar for bar like rapping about what a day in the life of himself is like. Talked about beating off, talked about hot pockets, talked, you know, the video ended with him falling asleep in a grocery store, just like ridiculous shit. But I was like, this is it, like this is gonna work. And it's also not, it was like serious enough. It wasn't like, oh, this is a joke rapper, you know, because that was never the idea. But it was like, what's the entryway? How are people gonna discover this? How are you gonna build a fan base? So we did that, and I was basically like, look, I'm connected to a few blogs, which was the thing at the time. I was like, not on some PR shit, you know, email blast. I was like, let me hit up a few people personally and get their thoughts on it. And sent it to, actually played it in person for Alex Fruchter, who was running Ruby Hornet, good friend of mine still to this day. Him and Barbara are just like the best. And he loved it. He was just like, yo, like, when is this coming out? Like, I need to post this on Ruby Hornet. And then our friend Black L, another great friend of mine, he was one of the 12 for 12 rappers. He sent it to Shake at Two Dope Boys because he had a connection there. And Shake was like, this is outrageous. So it kind of very quickly like caught fire on the blogs, which was my vision for it. I was like, this is how it's going to grow. And then then Christmas got really motivated because no one from Boston had really been on a blog like that. Beyond like the freshair.com, which was mine, you know, like no one had, I think Black L might've been on Two Dope Boys once, but it was rare. So that was a big thing. And then he sent me some more music, and one of the songs was Michael Cera. And again, I call him immediately. I'm like, this is the one. Like, this is the next one. I call Goodwin. I'm like, yo. And he was like, I already know. Like, I'm going to make a video for this. And I remember a lot of things just came together, serendipitously. I remember like having a meeting with this clothing company, Society, the guy that owned it, Marcel and Brendan, that I really liked. And I was in their like office, and they had like a Michael Cera t-shirt. And I was like, I need one of these for my guy. And that was back, I have a little more clout now, but back then, like, getting something free was pretty lit, you know?
For sure.
So I was really surprised. He was like, yo, just throw us in like the description. I was like, no problem. So the video opens with Christmas with this, this shot pans out. It's like Michael Cera on his shirt, and he's just this huge, overweight, lovable guy with an afro. And immediately I remember like, man, I mean, that shit really caught fire. It was like, Pigeons and Planes, Complex, like Double XL, like all of the it was, again, for Boss, unheard of. Like, no one had touched these sites. So it was a storm, and this was at the time where like I'm living at home. I'm like, I don't know, I'm like making a little bit of money freelance writing, and I really believed in the shit I was doing, but I didn't know what the path was going to be. I skipped over a funny detail, but it ended up, I'll tell you in a second, but ended up being Christmas that like really broke the ceiling for like a lot of artists in Boston, the scene, my career, Goodwin's career. Like, that was when Goodwin started to get a ton of attention for the video stuff, as he should have. It was brilliant. Just the way he did it was so deadpan and, super clever. Like, his work was always incredible. I remember Benny Blanco reached out to us and was like, I love this guy, and Benny had written, Katy Perry songs. And he's like, who is this guy you're working with? He's incredible. We met up with him in New York. Donald Glover's team reached out, and they were like, who the fuck is this guy, and who's doing the videos? It was this storm of like, yo, like, it worked, you know, 2 songs, but it worked. We got proof of concept. The funny detail I left out was when we were in that era of just like in Goodwin's crib, like making shit. We'd be at my apartment in Fenway. One day his mom comes to pick him up because he was 17, high school dropout. And his mom's this like super sweet, just really nice Puerto Rican woman. Christmas, his dad is black, his mom's Puerto Rican. And he's like, I want to introduce you to my mom. And she pulls up in a minivan, and she comes out, gives me a big hug. She's like, you're his manager. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, no, like, I'm telling you, like, you're going to manage him. Like, I trust you. He trusts you. I trust you. Like, I want you to manage my son. And I was like, okay. And this is, I didn't really know what management was. At this point, I'm just kind of looking, there's no business. This was pre those videos, Sure. But basically, Christmas's mom, like, made me a music manager. So I was like, all right, cool. And I guess that, and that's what I've learned all these years later. I'm like, ultimately, that's what it is. It's like a trusted creative partner. That's all it is, and it's someone that has the ability to help assemble a team of the right people and just help translate the artist's vision. Every manager has like a slightly different style, but that was always mine still to this day. Like, that's what I love about it. I was telling you, like, that's what I'm passionate about still, is like being close to the creative, kind of spearheading the marketing, and just being like an artist and a creative person, as I am myself, like confidant and friend and trusted voice. So anyway, that's how the ball then got rolling. And then, we kind of got confidence. We were like, all right, let's try it again. And then Stizz was someone that I had known. We had been friendly, and, he would come to me for advice. I thought his work ethic wasn't there in the way that Christmas had the work ethic. There were some missing pieces. Yeah. And it was almost the opposite with Stizz. I was like, there's a lot of pieces you have, but like the work ethic isn't there. So come back to me when you got some stuff to show me. And then he came back with a few unreleased songs, and I was like, oh man, like, it's go time. And I called Goodwin. I was like, I think we can do the same shit we did with Christmas in a totally different way. But like, I think we can really, get him going too. And Stizz was all in. So yeah, so that was that year, of like, it quickly went from like being sort of lost and confused, and like, I have this gut feeling of like what I'm doing is working, and it's going to work. It's going to be impactful and special. But I don't know how to make money from it. To, a year later, I mean, we're meeting everyone in the game, from Gambino's camp to Drake's camp to Ye's camp, like everyone off of like, our 2 homie artists from Boston. So it was a thrill for sure, which is around the time I met you too, like end of 2014, like fall 2014. That's when the three of us, me, Christmas, and Goodwin, moved here, and we were like, let's build our networks because we've kind of tapped out in Boston. It's a very small city, so we had done a lot of great shit, and we were like, let's come out here and like just learn.
Was there a reason that you guys landed in LA? Was there like was there any other places that you saw as like candidates for places to go?
It's really funny. I was reflecting on this lately. I kind of forgot about this little detail, but we were almost going to move to Atlanta, almost all of us. And it was because, so through my blog and like Goodwin's work and the stuff we did together, we were interviewing a bunch of artists and we got connected. I reached out to this guy, Mike Boyd. Do you know Mike? Or maybe, yeah. Mike, great guy. I've known him for a long time, works with Gary Vee. He was managing this rapper, Rome Fortune, at the time. I learned that Mike had gone to BU before me. He's a little older, so he had already graduated by the time I was a freshman, but we connected kind of off of that, met him at South by, and through that, then we started doing some projects together. Like we produced a video for Rome Fortune. Goodwin directed, and I like got the locations and kind of tied a bunch of people together in brands. And it's funny looking back, it's like everything, hindsight is 20/20, and you kind of learn about what the business was. And it's like we had like a creative agency, we had a label, we had a production company, but we looked at it back then as just like, we're just two friends that are like helping people out.
Yeah.
And when I look back now, I don't have regrets, but I'm like, we had a business without someone that understood the business.
Oh, dude, I can relate 1,000%.
Yeah. So it's one of those things I'm like, man, like with the right mentor or the right kind of other person involved, we could have built something like, I think pretty fucking massive and really successful at a high scale, but we didn't know what we had. And I think both of us were like very selfless and just like wanted to help our friends. And, we did a lot of free work for a lot of people, you know, a lot of dot connecting, a lot of, building shit up and making shit cool. And we didn't think anything of it because it was just a thrill to be involved with it. But when I look at younger kids now that are like business savvy too, I'm like, man, kudos to them because
for sure
I didn't have that.
Yeah.
I didn't have that.
Yeah. I very much felt the same way. Like, it's always been like a journey of like, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah.
And like, it's been beyond anything I could have ever dreamed and like still continues to be such.
Absolutely.
But actually applying like, oh man, if I was doing something a little bit different with how I was conducting business, like it would have just been better for all parties involved,
man. Yeah. And I got to reference this tweet that a friend of mine, Ego, posted a few weeks ago that I've been showing to like some friends of mine. I'm going to send it to you too, just so you have it, but I'm paraphrasing, but maybe I'm not, maybe I got it exactly right. But basically he was like, he does these like lessons of the day on Twitter. And he was like, lesson of the day, like let go of the illusion that, basically anything in the past could have been different.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that like helps you get peace of mind with anything. It's like, it's, you're always going to look back and be like, oh, had I had this knowledge, I would have done this. But that's not how life is. You
100%.
You pick up that knowledge from those situations. So I think about that anytime I have, not about this situation at all, but anytime I have like a sliver of like regret or like insecurity about something I made, I'm like, nah, like it couldn't have been any different.
Yeah.
Life is what it is. You learn and you try again, But anyway, so we almost went to Atlanta because we started, through this Mike Boyd, Rome Fortune. Mike was very connected in Atlanta, through Rome and through his work with Gary. He was doing like Avion Tequila brand partnership with Jeezy. Like he just got very connected and he was putting us on to everything there. And, he like put us on to Young Thug. And I remember, Goodwin shot Young Thug's first ever video, Loaded with Pee Wee Longway. And,
it's crazy.
Insane, and there's this photo, it's wild. There's this like behind the scenes photo that Mike took and posted of Goodwin. Like, I mean, he has like 4 or 5 loaded guns pointed at him, and Goodwin's here with his T2I or whatever it was, just like this. And they were loaded. They were really loaded guns. And years later, he would be like, "That was so, like, I would never have done that, but like, I had a chance to shoot a video for Young Thug. It's just what it was." And I remember he just learned a lot from that situation. He came back and he was like, "Yo, like, I hadn't been there yet," and he was like, "It's so fucking cheap down there," and he's like, "I got a ton of work down there, like." Video wise, he's like, there's so many more rappers, so many more artists, so many more studios. He was like, I can kind of like help bankroll this thing. Like I can just get so much work. Let's go down there and get a crib. It's really cheap. We can get like a 4-bedroom crib for like $1,500 a month, and let's move down there with like Stizz and Christmas and OG if he wants. Like let's do that. We almost did. I had hesitation because I was like, I don't know this city. Like, I don't know. I had a bad feeling about it. And then Stizz was, funny enough, Stizz was the one that really put his foot down. He's like, nah, I'm not doing that. Like, he's like, I'm not going to move to Atlanta. So that kind of squashed Goodwin's dream. And then I think collectively we were like, well, if it's not, the only reason we were doing that was sort of like Goodwin's network. Like, I didn't have really people in Atlanta other than Mike Boyd and his people, but it was like Goodwin kind of like, I can get work there. And it made sense because he was like, we can build a studio and a crib. Like, it made sense. But I had been to LA several times and I really loved the city. And I knew, at that point I'd started to meet people with different record labels and, just random connections. And I felt like I can make a home out of this place. LA's magical, coming from the East Coast, it's magical. So we ended up making the decision. We kind of moved separately, but like Christmas and Goodwin got a spot together. I kind of Airbnb'd it for like 4 or 5 months. Bounced around, went home for the holidays. Yeah, man. I forget the question. It was just about that era. Just
about moving, like the decision to move to LA.
Yeah, so that's
Simply
what. That's what it. Well, yeah. I guess you asked, like, could it have, had you thought about anywhere else? So yeah, we did. Yeah. But I was super happy with this decision. Immediately felt like home. And I said this to you in Toronto a couple weeks ago, but it was really like 3 groups of people and like spaces that made this feel like home. It was you in this space. It was Mac and Q, who Q to this day we have a show together, one of my closest friends. And it was Josh Pease and Anwar Carrots. Those were sort of my like 3 groups of people, and very intertwined. Like everybody knows each other, but Josh and Anwar, they had just shortly after we got to know each other, they let go of their shop. But I would like go and kick it in their shop. We would like talk about future together, and I would be at Mac's house all the time with Q, and they had their own community, met a ton of people, met all Mac's people who were just all fantastic people. And here I met so many different people too, just different people coming through the studio, looking back at some of the people like Christmas was like on random tracks with that you kind of helped facilitate those relationships. Like, I felt like I have these few different spaces and groups of people that immediately made this home.
Yeah.
I would always look forward to going back and seeing my parents and stuff, but at no point was I like, oh, I made the wrong decision. I want to be in Boston or I want to be somewhere else. It felt like this is the perfect place to learn first and foremost, and then just build upon what I'm doing. And like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it. And this is the right place to do it.
For sure.
Yeah.
I definitely, I came here from Utah by way of San Francisco for like 9 months before I moved here. But it just seemed like if there was any place in the world to build a business that was going to be known or work in music and like have a reputation, it's like bar none. Like, doing it in LA basically just means you've built like an international or a worldwide brand.
Exactly. Exactly. And just being like a sports outdoors guy, like I loved that I could be outside year round. Like that was incredible. Like in December, and like the sunsets have not gotten old to this day. Like there's nothing like a LA sunset. I would just, anytime I'd be going through it, I'd drive to the beach. I'd walk in the sand. I'm talking like January, February. It's like, when you're East Coast, you're in total isolation. It's like the seasonal depression is real. And out here, it's like I miss the fall. Other than that, I'm really happy with like the consistent nice weather here. So it was I think as easy of an adjustment as far as like a cross country move. No one in my family has ever been like west of Chicago.
Wow.
Not really. No one lives out here. Like is me. But obviously moved with a couple really close friends. Had a great community and. It's been home now for like the better part of almost 8 years.
Crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So what's you get settled, you meet these like different little groups and you guys start just weaving into, everybody's community and meeting all these people and how do things start moving from that point?
Basically, it was like part strategy, part just serendipity. I remember even like the Mac relationship. It was crazy, man. I mean, that was a really, really crazy year. 2014 was like, I don't know what I was fucking drinking or eating or thinking about or dreaming about, but like everything I envisioned came true that year. Everything. It was really wacky. Down to like, and I think I was just working so hard, man. Like it's sometimes you try to figure out the formula, but when you really break it down, you're like, I was just focused. Like I was just working hard. I had tunnel vision. I wasn't thinking about anything else other than, at that point I was writing for Pigeons and Planes too. I had a bit more steady of a check and, Jacob, shout out Jacob forever. Like, that platform allowed me to build my network even more. That had a lot more legitimacy than the freshair.com, which I had built something great. But when I became a writer for Pigeons, I had the ability to get bigger artist interviews, you know,
Sure.
and have people reaching out to me like, oh, this guy should be invited to this thing. Interview I did with McConan was honestly like changed my life in a lot of ways. Interviewed him before the Drake shit, got very close with him, ended up through that. Goodwin directs the Tuesday video. I'm in the Tuesday video. We meet Drake. Drake says Stizz's shout out's his favorite song. He listens to it before every show. So I would say all of us were doing these things, just such cool shit that like our network was compounding so fast.
Yeah.
And the center of it, to their credit, was Christmas and Stizz making music.
Yeah.
And then it was like me and Goodwin doing our creative stuff. It was just this nucleus that I think a lot of people started being like, damn, who are these like Boston boys moving around? Like people hadn't heard of, like, I would be in, you know, record labels and, you know, different brands and company meetings, and people would be so excited. Like, we haven't heard anything from Boston in like the hip hop space in forever. And I was so proud, man. Like I was like, we fucking did it. Like that was the goal and it happened pretty quick, you know, from starting my blog in 2012 to like meeting, I mean, damn near everybody in the game by end of 2014. I'm like, we kind of like dreamed this up and executed. And I'm not talking, you know, the biggest, most impactful level imaginable, but in our world, that was big. It was transformative. It was crazy. So where was I? Damn, I forgot what I was about to say. There's so many damn tangents. Well, do you remember the last question you asked?
I mean, I was just asking about like the community and the progress and how things were growing from being here.
Yeah.
You know, but it's a wide open question.
No. I'm remembering. So the Mac story, that's what it was. So, you know, this is when we're living in Boston. So right before the LA move. And I remember like walking in, me and Christmas, I've only had 2 roommates in my life. Christmas for 3 months and my girlfriend for the last 5 or 6 years.
Nice.
The Christmas experience was interesting. Loved the guy. Very messy. Didn't love it. We lived in a attic apartment in Alston with no AC during the summer.
Ouch.
But you know, dreams were made there for sure. We had you know, Goodwin would come up all the time from New York. He was living there at the time. Stizz would be over. OG, like many more people. Like our whole group would just come over. We would, you know, play 2K and blast music and dream. Literally, it was magical. It was incredible. And one of the things I said randomly, it just kind of came to me. I was like, man, like, I just think, I told Christmas and Goodwin, he was there too. I'm like, what you're doing, like what we got going on, this motion, at this point we had put out a mixtape together. It was getting a lot of love. He was getting tour offers, agents reaching out, like things were happening, you know, blogs trying to premiere, Fader trying to premiere videos, like shit was, he was in Matt Trammell, shout out Trammell. He wrote about Christmas in his like Gen F piece, like shit was moving. And I was just like, I feel like you and Mac like are going to do something. I don't know what it is, but I'm like, it just makes sense. I'm like, Mac's a character. I had never met Mac personally, but I was always a fan, and I was like, it just makes sense. And one of my first times I ever came to LA, it was actually to shoot the Tuesday video with McConan. We were running around the city with McConan and doing that video, and Q, who I had never talked to, he had like shared some articles I had written before. So we followed each other. I knew he was familiar with me, and he had shouted out my work. I was always very flattered. He had a big following, and I knew who he was, obviously, and he reached out directly, and he was like, yo, come through the crib later. And I'm sick. This is like Mac's boy. But I wasn't even thinking about Mac, but I was just like, oh, this is cool. So I go through and I meet Q and Clockwork, Mac's longtime DJ. They were living together in Hollywood, and I walk in, and Q's like, man, like, I look up to you, man. And I was like, what? I was like, what do you mean you look up to me? I'm like, you're the one that has a show on MTV. You know, I'm nobody, you know, but that's cool to hear. And I was like, why? And he's like, bro, like, and it's funny because I know Q so well, and like, it makes perfect sense because Q is really just like a real supporter and fan of shit, and like very, very, very humble. So I was looking at it like, who is this like much bigger, more successful person to be giving me this type of credit? But that's just how he is. You know, I remember him just saying, I think what you guys are doing is so sick. And he's like, I played Mac some of Christmas's music in his videos the other day, and Mac wants to get him out here. Like, he really likes him. He's like his favorite artist right now. And that was one of those moments where I was like, holy shit. Like, I had this little thought I put in the air, and like, I don't know, like, I didn't do anything to make it happen. It just happened. So that's how that relationship started, you know, shout out to Q. You know, so they get Christmas out, and, you know, we go to Mac's house. I'll never forget that first night. And Mac was just, you know, I tell a lot of stories about him, but just everything here is true. Just the most gracious, hilarious, like, center of energy in the best possible way. Like, just he made everyone feel at home always. Anytime you were in a room with Mac, And especially someone of his stature, there's usually a whole lot of ego involved. And there's usually a whole lot of like, who are you? You know, what are you doing here? But it's like, if you were in the room, and that's credit to like Q and Mac's circle, because I think he always knew that like, if you got in the crib, even if I didn't personally invite you, I trust whoever did. So there was just this like, very familial feeling when you were around Mac, you know, and I got to know him a lot better, you know, years later. But, you know, I'll never forget that. And he had a studio in his crib, and, you know, I was blown away, like watching him, you know, he was playing guitar and he was like recording himself and I'm like, oh, this dude like really is like a fucking musician, you know, and I knew it sort of. I was a fan, but I had never seen it up close. I'd truly never seen anyone that talented in my life, that multi-talented. I came from Boston, where there's some great producers, some great rappers, but I'd never seen anyone like Mac. Yeah. So it was a thrill just being there. You know, I met all kind of his people, you know, and that became like our go-to spot. Like we would be there every couple of weeks, and, you know, he would have parties there, and, you know, him and Christmas made a lot of songs. One came out. There's a handful that will never, but ones I still listen to, because it's reminds me of like a very special time. And so that was that's kind of how shit got going, you know. And then obviously, you know, he was recording here a lot. We started bringing, Stizz didn't live here, but I remember I got him with the very little money I had. I got him a one-way here because I was like, he was starting to make some really promising shit. He had that one song, Shout Out, that was buzzing. So people started to know who he was, and Drake kind of indirectly co-signed him. There was a video on his birthday of him playing the song in a Dave & Buster's. So I remember Fader did an article like, oh, is this about to be the next dude? Like, Drake, you know, gets $1 million deal or whatever. It didn't happen, unfortunately. But because we thought he was going to hop on the song for a minute. He didn't, and then we thought he was going to hop on something else. He didn't. It was just sort of a common theme for some reason with a lot of Stizz stuff. There's like some crazy scenarios with like mega A-list artists that just like almost happened but didn't. So we got him out here, and, you know, just I started bringing him around, you know, and the connections that we had built with Christmas, I started just, you know, hey, we got this guy too. And you know them both. They're both just great dudes. You know, it's like you don't have to work very hard from my perspective to like, all you got to do is help like build the relationship and help present the music. But it's like they speak for themselves with their talent and with their, you know, them as people. They're great. They're great people, you know. So that always made my job really easy, is like I can introduce them to anyone, and I know 99 times about 100 that person is going to like Stizz or Christmas, and there's going to be more opportunities from that. So, you know, that's to everyone's credit. That's how it kind of got started, was like all of us kind of doing a lot of cool stuff and making our own relationships, making collective relationships, setting up shop in a new city while also getting back home pretty frequently, you know, doing like, we did a bunch of stuff with Converse back home, and we would do the occasional show. It was a really exciting time because it was like, you know, not only are we getting like paid, you know, for gigs, they're flying us home. They're like, we got our, you know, all of our travel home for holidays paid for. It was pretty crazy, you know, because we did a lot of firsts. It was like, there wasn't shit like that happening. And now it's normal in Boston. And, you know, I feel like our sort of circle and era really broke down a lot of doors, which was, you know, and I don't ever want to be one of those guys where I'm constantly like, looking back at the past and like I don't only talk about that, but I speak of it in the way that I do, and still so proudly, because I know the impact that it's had. You know,
for sure.
And I'm like, that was the vision for everyone involved, was like, let's do this because we love it, but really let's show people that it can be done.
Dude, it's an amazing accomplishment to like forge a path forward for a division of like hip hop culture in a city that essentially either lost its magic for a little while, or I honestly don't really know too many people that came from Boston. Nothing really comes to mind. So to basically like break trail out of a city,
it deserved it. And you know, the scene was always great. And look, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing or have gotten into what I did if it wasn't great, you know. There were amazing like DJs and artists. I remember this guy, Real Pete, incredible DJ, that still throws very pop and successful events in the city. He, you know, would invite me out to listening parties. This artist Dutch Rebel, who's great. You know, there was a lot of stuff happening within the city, but that's where I felt like my role came in. I'm like, I can help bridge it a bit. That was what was missing, the bridge, which, you know, I know we talk about a lot, even with the Toronto relationships and stuff, but that was that was my vision, was like, let me put the world on. It's like, there's a lot I didn't create any part of the scene or the artist, none of that. It was just like a liaison. It was like, let me translate this in a way that I don't think anyone's quite been able to yet.
For sure.
And it was I said it 3 times, but very serendipitous, just that there happened to be a ton of people. My friend Malk, Jeremy, we have a little collective, kind of half public, half private thing called Those Talks, where we have done a lot kind of individually and collectively for the city. Malk was running WERS, like the biggest college radio station in the city. Jeremy's done, he has this company Steady Leanin', where he basically did the most successful hip hop events in Boston for the last 10, 12 years. And
wow,
we always kind of partnered on, he works at EQT now and Malk works at Live Nation. Like, we've all kind of grown in what we've done, but the guy Derek Chung, Goodwin, myself, like, there was this nucleus of people that were all very, very like-minded, very passionate about the city, and all wanted to like create opportunity that didn't necessarily exist. So it was a community-driven thing. It was special.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then so you're seeing all that stuff is like developing, and you're seeing it growing, and what's like the next series of moves that comes after that? So it's like, oh, there's this buzz, there's like, are you guys at that point like picking up mentors, or like is it looking at we need to now get to record labels because we've kind of outgrown our resources, or we want to like, what's the war plan when you're like, we moved to LA, we're meeting these guys, we just fucking making music with Mac Miller, like he's on top of the world, or headed there shortly before this, on this timeline, like, and then it's just like, how do you start? What's like the decisions now going forward?
Well, that's the funny thing, and kind of what I alluded to earlier. Like, there wasn't really decisions, know, and that's the part where I'm like, like a different version of me, or like a different, not a different partner, like someone else in the mix with Goodwin and I, or like a mentor, like would have seen that. And this is what I try to do with, and I take a lot of pride in it. I get a lot of younger, like, had a conversation a week ago, like Boston managers, when an artist they're working with, or even an artist himself, gets like a little bit of buzz, I'm usually one of the people they call. And I try to be very gracious with my time for the city specifically.
Sure.
And I've like, because I'm like, I want to be that guy that I didn't have, or we didn't have.
Sure.
So, and we were doing a lot, but that was the problem, I think, was like, Goodwin and I were spread a lot thinner than we realized at the time. And I can look back and be like, damn, we were, again, like I said, we were running a record label. I mean, we weren't managers. We were doing everything for multiple artists, literally everything. The creative, the PR, the marketing, the figuring out recording situations, the actual, like, the production process of everything, like connecting producers, like building the entire network, running the events. We were the agents. We booked the shows. Like, it was insane. And we did a really good job, but it got to a point where, like, Christmas, he did 2 massive tours, and this was a huge win, man. Like, we had no agent. I remember I was talking to like Jeff Vaughn, who at the time was at Atlantic, and he was trying to get artists signed to the label onto Logic's tour, and Logic's manager Chris and Harry at the time, they reached out to me. It was a lot of work that I did, man. Like, it was a lot of the groundwork. I'm not crediting myself with like the look, but it made it easy because I had done a lot of work, so people kind of like knew who I was.
Sure.
So then they were like, oh, I think they started paying attention to artists I was with because I had some credibility. So I remember Chris and Harry came to me and they were like, Logic wants to bring Christmas on tour. And I got Jeff Vaughn and big industry people being like, how the hell did you get on that tour? Like, you don't have an agent. And I was like, we just been working hard. I don't know. Like, he loves Christmas. I don't know what to tell you,
Yeah.
And no one was saying it from like a spiteful way. Everyone was just really curious.
Yeah.
I remember Stephen Victor calling me that summer and being like, how are you doing what you're doing? Like, and it was funny because then the industry sort of caught up a few years later, and
sure.
That's a different conversation. Things have really changed in the last few years, but when we were coming up, it was possible. Like, it was really possible to like not have like money fueling a situation and just be doing really good kind of crafty strategic work and like get a special type of recognition. So, Christmas tours, it's like me and Goodwin had both of our parents, because we didn't have the money. We had both of our parents front, $10,000 combined to Christmas was getting $250 a show, which was a no brainer. He got a huge fan base off of it, but $250 a show for 40 dates, that barely pays for food.
Yeah.
So it's like we had to pay our parents back for like 2 years.
Sure.
So just so Christmas could go on tour. And that was like in like a minivan. It wasn't even a Sprinter. Everybody's working for free. The DJ's working for free. It was our friends from Boston, Christmas's friend Alexa was like the driver, and his friend Chris Rogers was the photographer. Like it was our little hodgepodge. Marvel was the DJ, 6'9" Marvel. And nobody got paid. We didn't make money. We still at this point, we're not thinking about making money at all. None of Goodwin and I we're not thinking about money. We didn't care. Cause we were just like, this is so cool.
Yeah.
Like that we're able to, like, we got our guy on the road with Logic.
Yeah.
And then while he's on the road with Logic, Q hits me. He's like, yo, Mac wants to bring him out this fall. I was like, man, this is crazy. Again, no agent, nothing. And Christmas is touring back to back with Logic and Mac. He's on the road for, 100 days with two of the biggest artists in the game. And that one, Goodwin and him just did it together. We were laughing about that Christmas and I yesterday. They drove around in Goodwin's like BMW sedan. They just drove around the country together. And I think they that's when they started really butting heads, because I can't imagine
time to spend.
Hey man, I'd done a couple
and
cross country trips I'd done two with my girl and one with my good friend JMP. That was when I moved here. I drove out here with JMP, who's a very successful director, photographer, just insane creative.
Cool.
And that's like my guy, my day one guy. But anyway, I'm saying like even 4 days in a car with one person, doesn't matter how close you are. That's a lot. So I can't imagine 30 days in a sedan. But anyway, that was that era. And then while that's happening, Stizz is popping the fuck off. So, and it was sort of like, all right, I'm running around with Stizz. At that point, that was kind of what it became. It went from this like nucleus where we're creatively on the same page always with everything. We're very strategic. We're together. We're sitting in front of computers together. Goodwin's he's the talent, but I'm pointing things out. I'm swapping in shots, and it was all very collaborative. To all right, well, you got to be on the road with Christmas because we don't have money to like hire a tour manager. And this Stizz shit is popping off. I'm taking meetings with Stephen Victor and Che Pope with him. We're at one point they were trying to sign him to Good. I'm running around. Stizz and I, we always talk about this story, but we're running around at the Nice Guy with Che, and one by one introducing us by first name, to Bieber, to Party Next Door, to The Weeknd, to Scooter Braun, everyone, this is Stizz, our new signee, like we were signing him to Good. So those type of experiences. And, then I got Oliver, Drake's manager, on my line being like, yo, can you send me some unreleased Stizz shit? Like, I want to play some stuff for Drake, and then Gambino calling us being like, I want to produce a song for Stizz. Like, I want to be a producer. I don't want to be a feature. I want to be a producer. And then Pat hitting me being like, Chance wants to remix one of these songs. And we got an unreleased song with Post Malone. Cardi wants to get on Shout Out Remix. Like, that was before. Here. Yeah. Oh, I didn't even know that. That's funny. Yeah, he did that. I didn't even. Yeah, I guess I would have known that. I wasn't here for that. Yeah. Yeah, our friend Derek was a part of that. But anyway, man, it was a lot.
Yeah,
it was,
dude, that's a crazy.
Even that little snippet, it was a lot. And again, it was a thrill, and then I'm kind of, even personal life, I'm balancing like a new relationship. My girl and I, that was 7 years ago, but that was like a new thing. So I'm like,
right in the middle of all the fucking.
And I'm like and at the time I had been planning like a big relaunch of my blog, and I had some of my incredibly talented writer friends. I had a whole design, a whole strategy. Finally, I was like, I'm gonna like make this an actual like business, and I thought we could take over. Honestly, like, even though blogs kind of phased out, I thought what our plan was for it was going to be very successful. I had, my friend Tebbs and Alex Cyber and my friend Pape was kind of leading the design on it. Like, I had this crew of incredibly talented people, but it was all so much, and I was like, I got to put this on the back burner, the blog shit. Like, I can't do it all. Like, I got this my romantic relationship that I'm trying to pay attention to, because this is someone I really care about. I got two artists that are like really getting significant buzz. I'm kind of like faking the funk still. I don't really know what I'm doing business wise. Yeah. That's the thing. And it wasn't ever like faking it, but it was definitely like, in hindsight, like Goodwin and I together did not know what to do.
Yeah, of course.
We didn't know we knew what to do. We were so good creatively. That's the thing. Yeah. Which is two very different things.
Totally.
Scaling a business.
Yeah.
And
being creative.
And being creative. And it's funny, my mom would always tell me this. She's like a very business savvy, organized, strategic, very intelligent woman. And, she met Goodwin and knew everything we were doing. And she was like, you guys have something really special. Neither of you know what you're doing with business. Yeah. And I would be like, no, like we both kind of do. And she was like, no, neither of you do. Yeah. And that didn't make sense until like 2 years ago. And I was like, oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. And it wasn't like a slight. It was the reality, which is I have no business schooling. Yeah. Goodwin has no, we're art kids, you know,
Yeah.
like that's what we do. And I never looked at myself that way because I was never the quote unquote artist, but it's like I'm the creative type as well. And he might be more creative and more talented and like do a lot more hands-on stuff, but that doesn't mean I'm not that as well.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of amazing things going on, and I would say no room for strategy and no know-how with the strategy of like, well, what do we do with this thing?
Yeah.
What do we do with it? You know, I remember Dante Ross calling me and Leor Cohen. I mean, man, like it's insane looking back, like what 23, 24-year-old me was dealing with because I didn't know what I was doing. And I have like music legends and legendary artists like on our lines all the time, you know, and Dante coming to me being like, I want to give you an imprint. And in my head, I'm like, what the fuck is that? You know?
Yeah.
And all I remember thinking is like, well, how much are you going to pay me? And he was like, no, it's not, there's not like a salary. I'm giving you a label. But I just didn't understand it.
Yeah.
And no amount of reading
prepares you for that.
That's the thing is everyone says, you know, read the Donald Passman book or whatever. And there's some great knowledge in that. But without real world experience, whether it's doing it yourself, interning for somebody, being somebody's assistant, I don't think you really can know what you're doing.
100%.
And that was where it all sort of caught up to me a bit, where I feel, and there wasn't even room for this because I got a very, relatively late start with it all. But that's when I started to realize like, oh, and more so in hindsight the last few years, but that's where I started to realize, oh, like there's like a chapter missing in this book that I'm writing.
Yeah.
And I love it and I'm really proud of it. And there's some amazing stuff we've done, but I don't think I'm really ready for like what's happening. I don't really know what to do. I had this sort of naive mindset where like we didn't need a booking agent because why would we give up 10% if we can book shows? And we were having such success booking shows and booking tours that it wasn't, I don't think it was like foolish to think that way. It was just naive. Yeah. Because an agent at that time for like a Christmas or Stizz would have been very strategic with like what venues to play in what cities first, where we were just fielding offers and being like, hey, whoever's paying us more, we'll do it. Or whatever is the better look or whoever associated with will do it. And in hindsight, that was naive, and that's something that I would have, and I always do. I advise in line with a lot of the stuff I did, and I advise against a lot of the stuff I did, just the naive stuff, the lack of know-how. And we had some amazing people, like our friend Amir, like he was like my trusted sort of like big brother, type figure. Sure. So we would talk about everything I was going through. He was such an advocate for the artists. He was a huge fan of all the guys. Like he, before, Russell became Russell, he, took us in to meet Russell Simmons, and like we had a meeting with him about creative stuff. And Steve Rifkin, he was trying to get us, Goodwin and I kind of paired up with him to like help him.
Is he working with Freeway, Amir?
Yeah, he's always, that's like one of his best friends. He managed him forever. I think maybe he still does technically, I'm not sure. But Amir was like my kind of confidant, but not, for whatever reason, our conversations never entered like the business territory. Sure. I think he was just kind of like, he would help guide me like, oh, make sure you do your diligence with this person. So I think he was the closest person I had to like a mentor. Sure. But it was everything except the business side. So I would say we had no guidance on the business side. And that's where, when all of this amazing stuff was happening, in hindsight, that's where there was an opportunity for there to be a lot more strategy with like, okay, how do we build an actual company around what we're doing here, instead of just like throwing our skill sets to whoever asks for it, which is what we were doing. And again, even that was a thrill. Like we had athletes hitting us up being like, can you do our branding? I can't, an endless list of artists, a lot of big artists now that came to me like asking me to manage them, that I just couldn't, because I've two hands and one brain, in 24 hours. Yeah. But that's why I say, and there's truly like, there's no like regret. There's no like, oh, I never lost any sleep over it. But again, when I look back, I'm like, there was definitely an opportunity early on, and life gets in the way after that. Yeah. And it's like, all right, now I'm in a more serious relationship. Like everything changes, you know? But at that time I look and I'm like, oh, there was a point where the shit we were doing, we could have built something like really, significant around it, and instead we kind of just all started going our own ways. And that was in part because, like I said, Christmas was on the road, and this was an 18-year-old kid who had never left home, and then he goes to LA and he's has a great experience. But from knowing him, like he's a homebody. Like Christmas is not an on the scene guy, so the amount of time he spent out of the crib, like on the road, late nights, traveling, just in LA, he did those 2 back-to-back tours. And he was like, I got to go back to Boston, man. Like, I'm burnt out.
Yeah.
And I was like, I get it. And Ian was like, I got to go to Maine, like back where he's from. He's like, I'm a little burnt out. And I was like, I'm going to go to New York because this girl that I'm starting to date lives there. And like, I can still do what I'm doing from there. So we all kind of, and then Stizz goes back to Boston. So it was this, I would say, year and a half of like, we move in a pack. And then it was like that pack just dissipated and never really reconnected for no specific reason other than like, it all happened really quickly, and I think everybody got a little burnt out, and there was not like a clear strategy on like what do we do next. It was just like we'll handle whatever comes up,
sure,
which we did successfully. Obviously, we were able to, through all that, like release 2, I'm talking early days, like very successful projects for both of the guys, and do deals with major labels and independent labels, and build real businesses around both the guys that. To this day, it's like, they haven't had to think about anything but music in 8 years. And I'm like, that's something I'll forever be, proud of, just being able to help people and others, like do what they love for a living.
Yeah.
But I also I think it's super important with anything to look back and be like, all right, what are some lessons I can take towards something in the future I want to build? We're young, I'm 30 years old. Like I'm really 31, but I take off a year because of 2020, but I am 31. But I'm like, it's, we're very young, and there's a lot of people that, build their biggest, most successful companies in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s.
Yeah.
So I'm like, as proud as I am of so much of what we did, I think it's been really healthy for me in the last 2 or 3 years to look and be like, well, here's what I learned from that could have been even more successful
100%.
And still can in different ways. But I try to be as self-aware and accountable as possible. That's like my journey in my 30s is like, and I've always been, I think, a little bit, but I'm like, more than ever, man. It's like the podcasts I listen to, the people I pay attention to. I try to consume content from people that are those things, that are self-aware and that are accountable, and that can look at shit that they've done, good or bad, and be like, this is what it is objectively, not just through my own lens. So
I think it's generally one of those things where you have that time period in your 20s. I had a similar experience, multiple similar experiences of kind of being like at the center of the nucleus, like of the industry in a way, where you're just like, I'm holding like a flare in the middle of the circle right now, and like, I don't really know, like I didn't intend to be here. I just found myself standing here with all these people who you all look at and love, and they're just friends of mine who I make music with, and now you get to like look at that chapter and look back on that chapter and say like, oh, like if I would have had my wits about me, I would have been like, yo, let's do like a small deal for this project that I'm doing for you for free, and I'll have 5% of this or whatever, and start to build a business model around like joint venture artist friendly deals. And just, you start to understand all these things that are like, oh, I kind of had an idea about that, but I never really executed that. And now I'm doing that with everybody going forward. And it's this model that's been working really well for all parties. But like, had I done that through my whole era of 2009 to 2019, it's like a whole different world would have existed,
Yeah, but the other thing you got to remember about that era was like, people weren't making money from the music. That's the strange thing. And I always break, we talk about this, but I break it down, and with era and so much of, how successful an artist gets in any capacity has to do with just timing of what were the trends and what were the business models primarily at the time that they were releasing music. I always say like Christmas thrived from being like a blog darling, and that was because the blogs were about more than just the audio experience of a song. It was, what does a person look like, where are they from, what's their story, what do the videos look like. There was more to it, and there's people from each era that are perfect for that era. But the business of that time, producers weren't getting paid. I mean, none of the music that we put out from 2013 through 2015, producers weren't paid. They have publishing, but that because we would throw stuff on iTunes, because of course you throw it on iTunes, but no one was thinking about, how do I make money from this? I didn't know anything about streaming royalties, nothing. Even some of the biggest artists, think about like Future, Travis Scott, like Days Before Rodeo, and Future's crazy run of like Monster and, you know, Beast Mode,
Yeah.
you know, 56 Nights. All of that was just SoundCloud, you know, all of that music. So I think it's easy to look back and be like, oh, like I should have like monetized this differently or done deals, but it's like people weren't even doing deals like that at that time. It was strange. And then when any artist, and I've talked about this with manager friends of mine, artists that signed deals, major label deals in like 2016, us being one of them, got kind of screwed, because in 2017, that's when the Spotify playlist business really exploded.
Sure.
And that's when like you had a hot song, you know, a song that gets in the $1 million, $2 million, $10 million range, you get $1 million deals. And 2 years prior, you could have these crazy analytics and stream counts on SoundCloud and YouTube, but labels didn't know how to monetize that.
Yeah.
You know? And it was like few and far between. Like, yeah, you had your like Chance the Rapper, who everyone was like, oh, you know, he could get a $10 million deal if he wanted to. Yeah, there's going to be artists that capture like the zeitgeist. They're, you know, but there's a whole lot of artists that like 2017, 2018, 2019 got fat checks and huge label situations because, you know, they got playlisted in the right way. You know, I remember talking to my friend Justin, Amina's manager, about, you know, they were one of the first artists, I think it was Fresh Finds, that like really, like Caroline, like really popped off when Tuma put that in Fresh Finds, and that was like mid 2016, you know, so that was when it kind of started. But like the Stizz and Christmas, when they got started era, it was SoundCloud, it was Audio Mac, it was like live mixtapes, it was that Piff, like no one cared about anything but let's create an online buzz and let's get paid by brands and for shows. Yeah, that was it. So, you know, that's why I look back and I'm like, yeah, there was a lot. There was naivete that came with the lack of foresight and business understanding, but there was also just like, this is what it is. Like, it's kind of like the Wild West, which I loved, because to me, you know, it sounded like an old head, but it really was about the art for real. Yeah. Like it was about, you know, and it's changed, and, you know, for good in some ways. It's like producers get paid now. They weren't really getting paid back then unless they got major label cuts, you know, and producers obviously are like, you know, they're getting cut in on all the independent shit now too. So there's more people making money, but it's also way harder to cut through. Yeah. Way harder.
Yeah. I feel like it is too. Yeah. So you guys get a label deal, and what's the feeling going into that?
Yeah. So we did a deal with Stizz and RCA in mid 2016. And, you know, similar to everything I've been talking about, man, it was like, it's hard to describe like what kind of accomplishment that was, because again, like, it all happened very fast. And, you know, I met Stizz in mid 2012, but he didn't take music seriously until top of 2014. We put out his first song mid 2014, and it's like a very organic, slow, it's not like we flooded the internet. It was like 8 months before his next song. So it was this very slow growth. We put out what I will forever stamp, I think, is one of the best debut mixtapes ever, with Suffolk County, in June 2015. And we did everything right. You know, I think, you know, all the pieces just aligned. Like, we were very, very, it was organic and strategic, but like we built relationships in like the best possible way. And again, like I said, like Stizz, just who he is, spoke for himself. And we created the foundation exactly how we wanted to. One of my biggest compliments was Oliver had reached out a bit after that, and he was like, you guys have built the foundation so strong. And I was like, damn, this is Drake's guy, you know, like that to me was like the biggest, as a manager, biggest cosign you can get is like, we've kind of built it strong, you know? So, you know, and at that point, again, like it's not always about Boston, but coming from where we came from, you know, where Stizz grew up, you know, Dorchester, Massachusetts, you know, going from like putting out a song and being dead broke to like, you know, signing a 6-figure deal and signing a six-figure, you know, publishing deal, was crazy, you know, just, and beyond, it's not the money. It was just, it was the legitimacy of it for all of us. It was like, this really worked, you know, like, this is crazy. Like, this is shit we, you know, sat and just kind of talked shit about, and it really happened. And, you know, we never did a major label thing with Christmas, but we did a slew of like kind of independent and distro deals. And he, you know, in his own way got a shit ton of cosigns, and like really big things happened, the tours. So again, it was like these two things that, you know, we started from dead scratch, and these weren't artists that had situations going that we scouted, and this was just friends. So that was what made it so rewarding. And
for sure,
people, you know, I think I always get or used to, I would get the question so often, like, why did you decide to manage those guys? Like, what about them? And I was like, I didn't decide to manage those guys.
Yeah.
I didn't decide to manage.
Yeah.
It's like hard to believe that it was as organic as it was, but it really was.
Yeah.
And it came through a lot of hard work, but it was it just kind of all happened, and we all put our best foot forward. We all worked really hard, and we were just like good stand-up dudes, and getting to the point where we can get that type of opportunity with like a major label. I think that for a lot of people back home, we're like, oh shit, like we've been saying it can't happen for 15 years, and it can. And more importantly than the deal, it's like we were selling out every show we did.
Yeah.
To this day, it's like he's only done sold out shows,
That's crazy.
We went from doing his first show was 180 cap, Middle East upstairs. Everyone does it. Sold out in 3 days. It was unheard of. The crowd was insane. People were buying tickets on Craigslist for $100. So it was a $12 ticket. I mean, literally. And they were trying to get us to move it to a different venue, the downstairs. And I was just like, nah, I want
feeling.
Yeah, I want this, like, because I knew it would create something that had never existed in Boston, which is like you can't get into a local artist show.
Yeah.
It used to be like you can walk into a local artist show, halfway through and like, walk in, get a beer at the door, have a bunch of space around you, talk to a friend while the performer's on.
Yeah.
And Stizz changed everything in Boston. Like you can't do that. You have to buy tickets to shows, which was really cool. So that was rewarding. And like I said, the deal was, anyway, we do that show the year later, 900 cap, a year later, 2750 or something like that.
Wow.
It's insane,
Yeah.
Just the growth and the label situation definitely like legitimized it all, and it gave us what we needed finally, which was some bread, because all of us at this point were still like just getting by and like trying to figure out, all right, well, what else can we do to make some money? And that gave us an opportunity to like just focus, and be like, all right, let's we have the budgets. We don't have to like call in a billion favors all the time, which
sure,
it's a shitty feeling to have to always call in favors. So that was the first time we were like, all right, we can like pay producers, we can pay videographers, we can whatever. So yeah, in short, like it was just rewarding, and it was cool just to have the experience of having more hands on deck and more people involved. And like a lot of people have said and will always say, like, definitely wasn't what it was cracked up to be, but we had great people involved, and it was I think like a pretty essential at that time, especially even given the state of the industry. Like there wasn't money being generated. So I'm not gonna say we didn't have a choice, but it was the best thing we could have done at that time to like keep things moving forward and like continue to build buzz. So it was I don't know, it was mid 2016. It was like in a way it was like the closing chapter of the closing page of a chapter or whatever,
Sure.
Like, because we all were, still kind of in our own corners of the country. Like at that point we still weren't, like I said, we never really all came back together. Like that was kind of just like, all right, cool. Well, now we can like breathe a little easy, and like, it's very legitimate, and doing this shit for a living. We can work harder, but there's still, that it didn't like revive any of this like collective energy. It was just like, all right, well, let's just communicate and figure it out.
Sure. Yeah. So you go through all this whole fucking journey, and then all of a sudden you get slapped with COVID. And what is
4 years later
period like for you as you're kind of realizing, like, going into 2022 that things are slowing down and life's getting different?
Going into 2020, you're saying?
Or sorry, 2020, yeah.
Well, dude, I mean, it was a weird time, man. I mean, that was 2019. I was on a flight every other week the entire year, and Christmas did a bit of touring, but I was mostly running around with Stizz. We were in the studio all the time. I was like very, our friend Lil Rich had a studio in North Hollywood that we were just in there all the time, working on Stizz music and just working on music, talking about life. I was spending a lot of time in the studio. We went, I don't even know what the fuck it was, but we just were on the road all the time, like just different meetings and different shows and different festivals. And he played a lot of random one-off festivals and stuff that year. Released an album. I went to Toronto for Caravana that year with Addy and just had the time of my life. Went to Drake's house, which was like very new at the time, which was a blast. I don't know. It was just a lot. We went to London. Stizz played a show in London, sold out. It was beautiful. Like a relatively small room, like 350 cap, but it was incredible. It was like blown out, and it was like the first Boston show. That was his first time in Europe, so that was crazy. That was like Thanksgiving week. Come out, we do the 2,700 capacity venue in Boston again, blown out. So it was like, things were continuing to just grow and move forward, and I had also started working with a couple other artists and producers. That was the first year where, I would say 18 and 19 specifically, where I started to expand beyond like Cam, Stizz, and Christmas. Like that was kind of my core. I had started working with, I guess 2 years prior, I was working with producer T-Watt that did a lot of Stizz's stuff, and but it took on a couple of newer artists and newer projects, a couple of producers. That was the year where I was like, all right, I'm gonna expand, and like, because I had a couple offers to kind of merge management companies with larger companies, and none of the situations that were presented were what I felt like the right situation for me. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna double down and really learn the business side of it, and like try to scale my own thing. And then January Kobe dies, and then it was like, all right, there's this dark cloud over LA for like a month from that, and then you pick your head up from the dark cloud, and it was COVID, so weird time, man. Weird time for everybody. It's surreal, looking back, being like, we couldn't have done this, like, it's just the strangest thing. And it's obviously like this shit is still out and about, and but we've obviously figured out how to live with it and deal with it, and hopefully we're better equipped to handle just infectious disease, period. I think there's a lot of obviously misinformation. We don't got to go down that road, but it was for everybody a challenge, but for me personally, it was like I have asthma, so I was like one of the hyper cautious people. I was just like, I'm not taking any chances. And when I eventually did get COVID, it fucked my asthma, and that was after being vaccinated, boosted. So I was like, I can't imagine prior to that stuff how my asthma would have held. So I made the right decision, but it definitely put, as for everybody, business on hold completely. Nothing was happening. I mean, my job my role that I played that year was what I've always done in small bits, but just like talking to the guys, and not just them, but new people I was working with too, just like helping. I was a therapist for a year and a half, full time, not getting paid to be a therapist, and I'm not complaining. It was great, and I was so happy, and people were there for me in the same way. But that was what I did for a year. There was no, we did one like ticketed live stream show with Stizz that went really well. We did I don't know. I think the positive, and like Christmas and Stizz would tell you too, like they both learned to record themselves, which I've been telling them. I was told you that last week for years. I was like, yo, like just to have I'm not saying don't go to studios, but just have an option. Like, you can't afford to be in the studio all the time. So learn to record from home. They finally did. So they both, for the most part, make music exclusively from home now. And there's no overhead there, which is nice, and still love going to studios. But that was helpful for the long term. But it was weird, man. I mean, it's hard to believe. Like, it's been, 2.5 years. Like, it's just
almost 3.
Yeah, like, that's what I say. Like, when I joked about like being 30, not 31, I'm like, that's really how I feel though, because my 30th, and it was great. I got to see my family, but my girl and I drove cross country just because there was nothing to do. So we were cooped up in the crib. We like didn't leave the crib from like March until September, and then in September we were like, we wanted to go home, and both of us were a little apprehensive about flying, and we were like, we haven't done shit in 9 months. Let's just go on a road trip. So we drove cross country, kept my car there for 3 months, stayed out there till January. It was as with a lot of things in life, you're going through it and you're like, this kind of blows, but you look back and you're like, man, that was a really unique, special time. Like I got to see my grandma, who she sometime top of last year. Yeah, that's what it was right after I left. So I was home in Connecticut from October 2020 until top of January 2021, and my grandma had already had like pretty severe dementia, like didn't know who I was, doesn't know who my mom is. Same thing her mom, my great grandmother, dealt with, but she was living at home with my grandfather 5 minutes from where I grew up. And I hadn't been home for 3 months at a time since high school.
Sure.
So it was really special, and I got to see my grandma once a week, and she asked me my name and all these, doesn't know who I am, but she was like really warming up to me. And by like my last visit, like the night I was picking up my girlfriend in New Jersey to drive back west, I went over there, and had this like really sentimental moment where my grandma was like so happy to see me, and it was like it was 10 years ago where she knew, something clicked, and she and my grandpa were like dancing in the kitchen, and it was just this beautiful moment. And a week later she went downhill, and she's been in a nursing home since. And I look back at that time, and I'm like, in no other circumstance would I've been able to have that moment and the weeks leading up to it, just to like see my grandma. And it's been tough, as so many people deal with that. It's really tough watching someone lose their mind in that way. But that was just a little thing where I look back and I'm like, I'm so grateful for that period. And I don't want to be one of those, I'm grateful for COVID. I'm not grateful for COVID. It fucking sucked. But I'm grateful for some of the beautiful moments I and a lot of people were able to find within it that wouldn't have happened otherwise. I read 45 books that year.
Holy shit.
Yeah. And, I've always been a reader, but like, I'll read a few books a year, you know? I read 45 books. I just started knocking books off my list. I watched Sopranos. Never had seen Sopranos before. Finally, start to finish, loved it. The Watchmen was incredible. I still got to do The Wire. I know people get on my case. I still
haven't seen that either.
Yeah, man, it's a thing. Yeah, I know. I started it. Honestly, man, I started it twice. I don't dislike it. I haven't been able to really get into it.
Me either. I think I tried twice too. Damn. And I was just like,
I did try that during that time, but yeah, man. I mean, it was weird. It was weird for the business for sure, because you're alone with your thoughts, and you're like, well, what am I doing this for?
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of people got kind of faced with during that time. And a lot of my peers, you and I have had this conversation, a lot of my friends that work in music, it was definitely like a reflect period, and a lot of people sort of came out of that with like a reconfigured version of what they do. I know several people that pivoted completely out of music into like screenwriting or into some random other field. I think it was it was a time where you had to give thought, or maybe should have, whatever, given thought to like, well, what does this kind of all mean? The world has changed a lot since then, a lot for the worse, unfortunately. So, that's where my head has been at and was at during that time period, especially, is like, well, what is it about what I do that I really love? And it's really okay sometimes to close a chapter, close a book, and start a new one.
Yeah.
And I'm not in a position where I'm like starting a whole new book that's another genre, but I'm definitely like, I mean, even the way I speak on it, you can hear me. I look back on things with a lot more clarity than I would have, I think, 2 years ago, because I had that time to like really process and think about where I'm at, where I've been, where I would like to be. And I'm very much in that sort of where I would like to be forming stage. But yeah, it completely interrupted the business. There's some things that we kind of all picked up where we left off, and there's been some great things, even with the guys, that I'm very happy to still work with Stizz and Christmas all these years later. It's like Christmas started doing stand-up comedy, and he's really excelling, and that's something he's wanted to do forever. Finally, took a stab at it and is having a lot of fun, and it's a space that I would like to work more into, just like a different type of art, a different type of performance, a whole different network, and something he's really passionate about. He's still making a ton of great music, but it's just kind of an added thing. And Stizz is like kind of re-inspired in a new way, very similarly, like kind of a what am I doing it for? It's really easy, and this, we've talked about this, you said it, but like, it's 10 years is like that, you know. There was a kid that reached out to me, my boy Nick Dybell, who I think is like a brilliant, super talented, young creative kid, like 20 years old. He reached out to me when he was going into college. This was 2020. So he was about to start school that fall, reached out, and we had one call, and I was just really impressed with the kid. And I was like, I see some of me in you, but like, you're starting 4 years before. So like, I want you to use me as like a mentor, like anything. I'm not calling myself that. He called me that a few weeks ago, and I was like, damn, that was cool. Someone called me a mentor, but I take pride in it, because I'm like, I'm not trying to overstep at all, but like, if there's some shit you ever need advice on, I'm here, because I think what you're doing is incredible. But I remember him, asking me like, oh, what was September 11th? Like, I wasn't born for that. And I was like, damn, like, I'm getting a little older, you know, like, it's just one of those little things. And, he, it's
a crazy question.
And I remember, cause there's about a 10-year difference between us. Yeah. About 10 years. And I remember, he was hearing my stories, and he's like, you've experienced so much. It's crazy. He's really kind of blown away by some of these stories that I never share, but I told him, and I was like, look, man, like, the one thing I'll say is like 10 years is, I'm like, the way you look at me, because I remember being 20 and looking at someone that was 30 and thinking like, damn, they're kind of old,
Yeah.
you know? Like I remember, you know, thinking 30-year-old me would have a fucking mansion somewhere and,
Yep.
you know, all these dreams that you have no idea how to attain. You just think the passage of time will get you those things. But the passage of time is just, it happens insanely fast.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you blink and, you know, just like we're talking about, COVID happened 2.5, almost 3 years ago, the beginning of it. And same thing with just my career, all this shit. It's like we're sitting here talking and I'm like, I feel like this could have been us in fall 2014. You know, it's like, it doesn't feel like, I mean, what is time? You know, but it's like, it doesn't feel like there's been 8 years that have passed since then. It doesn't feel like, you know, I started my blog like more than a third of my life ago. Like it doesn't feel like, you know, a third of my life has been spent doing this type of stuff, but it has. And that's what I think it's always healthy that's what I've done in the last year. Especially even post 2020, just kind of picked my head up and been like, let me like spend a little bit of time just assessing, you know? And I've never wanted to be someone that just shows up and just continues, you know, chugging along and without much thought to where it's going, what it is. So I would say, you know, like for a lot of people, that's what like the 2020 COVID era did for me, was just kind of catalyze, I think, motion towards like whatever is next. And I'm not departing from who I am, my identity, what I've done, but
for sure,
it's just like, all right, well, you know, we got one life, and as we see, like this shit, you know, it can all be taken away, whether it's collectively, individually, like it can all be taken away at any point. So it's super important just to really love what you're doing, not just love what you did or what you should be doing.
Sure.
You know,
so at this point, like, have you determined what like the new North Star is? Like, are you in that process of,
it's a great question,
still sorting that out, or is it like I've got the rescripted new directions and I'm pointed this way?
Yeah, it's in editing stages. North Star is a good way to put it. You know, a friend of mine, that's one of the guys that I was referring to that pivoted out of music, who's doing like some nonprofit work now.
Cool.
He gave me some great advice, year or two younger, and he was like, write down your mission statement. He's like, have you ever thought about like your mission statement? I'm like, not really. Sort of. Like, I know what I am, I know my morals and what I care about, but not really. And it's more difficult than you would think. I've been working on my mission statement, and I think I got it pretty close. And he basically was like, that helped inform like my big change in my career, was like really thinking about what matters to me, you know, like not just legacy plays a role, but just like what matters, you know, like what is it that I want to be doing? And if I'm not able to achieve or, you know, succeed in my mission through this job or this role or this lifestyle that I'm a part of right now, then it's okay to just switch it up. So I think the North Star for me has always, and it's so vague, but it's always been people, man. Like I really deeply care about people. I really deeply care about stories. I really care about helping people be a better version of themselves, and see things from a different perspective. I've always loved writing and just creating platforms, creating anything that evokes like hope or opportunity. I'm doing that in like a small way with the new show I got with Q. You know, it's like I've always wanted to do some form of like radio, like I used to do, like radio show, podcast style. It's sort of a hybrid that we're doing, but that's been really fun because it's like giving me a refresh on like music discovery, because it's just we're playing whatever we fuck with, new or old, because it's integrated with the Amazon Music app. So I'm like enjoying this sort of like host DJ hybrid gig, little side thing, but it's been a lot of fun because it's allowing me to reconnect with a lot of the people that I really admire, people that I want to help serve in some way that I haven't been able to in a long time, because the business of like management, you know, a record label, whatever, it's like you know you're serving your clients, and that's how it should be. But this sort of other platform that I have now, it's like I don't just, you know, you might not have a hand or you know, there might not be a way for you to contribute to like the Cousin Stizz business, but I really love what you're doing and I want to support it in some way.
Sure.
And that could be as simple as playing a song, that could be as, you know, could be having a conversation, it could be whatever. So I think while I continue to sort out like, well, what other components do I want to add, or what other roles do I want to play, I think just continuing to get back to my roots of, or, I've always had them to a degree, but like get back to the roots of just like sharing shit I really love, having conversations with people I really love and admire, and trusting that opportunity will arise from being honest and being vulnerable and being self-aware. And that's a challenge that I've been giving myself recently, is like when I talk to people that I trust, it's trusted people, but friends of mine, people I look up to, I'm being a bit more of an open book than I was 5 years ago. I'm being a bit more of like letting you into my head. Like, this is where I'm at. I might not have the answer for you, but I'm gonna let you in a little bit. And it's like, I think pulling it, I never looked at it as ego, but it is a bit. It's just pulling down the wall a bit, the ego a bit, and just being like, hey, like, I don't gotta be perfect. I don't have to have a scripted answer for, what are you up to? What are you doing? What do you want to do? I can sit with you and say, hey, this is what I care about. And I'm pretty open-minded. And I know there's some things I want to add. There's more shit I want to accomplish, but I don't necessarily know. But this is how I feel. And I would love to, there's been a lot of like collaborative energy lately with me. There's been a lot of like, hey, I would love to like work on something together. I don't know exactly what it is, but like we've kind of had parallel paths for a long time. We've maybe, connected in some other way. Like, let's just keep open mind. And I feel like there's a lot of people post 2020 with similar energy, where like a lot of people want some change. And I've really enjoyed that stage of my life right now, is like being very self-aware, vulnerable, honest, and very open-minded. Just like, hey, there could be something as, like I said, the show kind of came to me, the show opportunity with AMP. But that kind of reminded me like, hey, I can go get those opportunities too. I don't just have to wait for shit to come to me. I can, do a little bit more facilitating and strategizing on my end. Like, hey, what else? Let me pitch one of my good friends, Jorge, we've been talking about just pitching concepts to brands, to company, whether that's a ad campaign, whether that's, a partnership between an artist and a platform, whatever it is, just, or a content concept, whatever, just pitching stuff, and being proactive. So I think that's the last bit too, is like, I was very, very fortunate early on in my career to generate energy and ideas and have a lot of opportunities incoming. And now I'm trying to like flip it a little bit and be like, things came in because it stemmed from what I wanted and what we worked on, but I can also reverse engineer and be like, let me actually target specific things and not just, stay in a place where I have just incoming work that some of it I love, some of it I don't love. Let's go out and get more opportunities, just by trying. So, and being collaborative, like working on shit with teams. I've done a lot the last 5 years. I would say a lot of, hey, Tim, what do you think about this? Oh, Tim, I'll tell you. It's a lot of just me versus, me to me in my head. It's like I've trusted people, but I've, in being self-aware and looking back on everything, I'm like, I know the value of team more than I ever have in my life, which is a really great feeling, just having more, more voices in the room, more brains to bounce stuff off of, and knowing that like, just because I can do something doesn't mean I should do something. And that's how I looked at stuff for a while, which is like, hey, it wasn't being selfish or greedy or nothing, but it was like, if I'm capable of doing something, I'll just do it. Yeah. But I was capable of doing this show alone, but I made a decision. I was like, I don't want to do the show alone. I want to bring in my friend Q. We've talked about doing something together. Yeah. We'll split the bread and we'll do it together. And it's been so much more fun. Yeah. So
yeah, I totally get that, man.
Yeah. So that's where I'm kind of shaping right now. It's going to be a lot of the same energy behind what I do, always. And there's gonna be a lot of the same people, which is a blessing, man. Like I look back 10 years ago and I'm like, damn, I have a lot of the same friends, a lot of the same people, you know? So,
which is rare in itself.
I know. Not very many bridges burned. The people that aren't in my life, they're not supposed to be in my life. So yeah, it's all good. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely get that, man.
Yeah.
Well, shit, I feel like we did a pretty good job of running the timeline.
Comprehensive. That was very chronological and comprehensive. That was fun.
I don't know if there's anything else that comes to mind that, you feel like we didn't discuss, but I feel like we turned over quite a bit of
we did, man.
Stones along the path.
We did. No, I proved that I can go on tangents forever about any era. I don't know, man. there's so much of this that I've like, I don't think I've ever done like this comprehensive of a like boom, 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 all these different moments. I've talked about it a lot, and I said it at one point, you know, but I'm like, I don't want to be someone that just is constantly like rehashing and like revisiting old things and being like, oh, this is who I am. But there's so much of it still that I do enjoy talking about, because it's like a reminder to myself. You know, when people listen, a lot of, you know, I always have to remind myself, like, there's a lot of younger kids that don't know anything about any part of my journey, you know, that are looking to people like you and I. Doesn't matter how big or successful, they're looking to people that are, you know, creative, talented, any measure of success people, that they're like, what the fuck did they do to get started, you know? So that is really important. And then the second part is, you know, I always leave these conversations just inspired, because I'm like, damn, you know, I've done quite a bit, but there's still so much to do, you know? And like, if 23-year-old Tim can dream up some shit, it's like, I can go home right now and sure, let's do this thing, you know, with this person. I know there's a lot. I had a great conversation with my friend Rodney King the other day, where we talked about the importance, we're about the same age, of just like unlearning, you know? And so much of what gets you that initial success is your instincts. And then you kind of learn the game, and you learn, you know, structure, and you learn how business is done, and, you know, and then you're like, I got to unlearn some of that shit. Like, I got to go back to just being instinctual, you know, and like not always strategizing about everything, and not always thinking, you know, financially first, which, you know, naturally the age we're at, it's like we got bills, we got real lives, you know, we got to think about that in a different way than we had the ability to do when we were 23 or 22 or whatever. 100%. It's a totally different game, but there's elements where you're like, I gotta just give myself the grace to, like, you know, experiment and like unlearn and just try new things, and who cares if something fails, you know? So but no, man, appreciate it. This was just a great,
man, I appreciate it.
Conversation.
This was amazing to listen to everything, you know, and run through that whole just timeline of your life. Like, there's so much cool stuff, you know. It's like the phenomenon of doing these episodes has been like, the goal has been to really try to document like the beginning to end journeys of people, or beginning to current, you know, journeys. And like, it's so many people that I've met through the studio that, like, you know, generally when people come here, like, I'm engineering, so it's not like I'm like able to have a conversation with somebody. I'm usually trying to facilitate what's happening with the direct creative person at the time. So it's like circling back to have conversations to really actually get all the details when you only have bits and pieces of stories is like such a fascinaing
it's the best, man,
experience, man.
It's the best. I mean, even when I saw you in Toronto a couple months ago, man, like I think that night when you came back home, I just had one of those like incredible talks with Addy, where like I've known him since kind of those days, barely in those days, and then we really connected in 2019. And you know, I watched your episode with him recently, and I learned so much from that I wouldn't have otherwise. And then he and I are sitting, and he's giving me a history lesson, as he always does, on like, you know, Toronto and the infrastructure there and his involvement with everything. And you know, I don't know, I never get sick of those conversations with people that I admire, you know. So I have to like tell myself to shut the fuck up sometimes. I'm like, it's okay just to like talk about, you know, your experiences. But yeah, man, you're right. It's I don't know. There's a lot we still have to learn from each other. Yeah. And which is the best part of all this stuff, is just like, it's never gonna end, you know. There's this dude Simon Sinek that I've been like really admiring lately. He's like has one of the biggest TED Talks. He's this incredibly enlightened, sort of like vulnerable, motivational sort of speaker. I feel like you would like. And I just listened yesterday, like a new episode. He did this guy Steven had a podcast that he did once, and he did it again 2 days ago. And I'm like, I could listen to both on loop, you know. It's like, just because they're having like sort of similar conversations, it's like there's something I pick up. It could be one little quote, you know. It doesn't matter. It's like those conversations always lead to somewhere good. You know. Well, killer, dude, this was epic. No, thank you. Amazing. Thank you, man. Thank you for coming to do this. Me too.